What's up, folks? This is episode number 91 of the Avocado Games cast, the podcast that turns into a disgusting brown mush if you wait too long to consume it. Today, E3 is dead, Summer Games Fest is on the way, and the UK doesn't really like mergers. Plus, we're talking about PC ports and the latest happenings in the Grand Theft Auto role-playing community. But before we get to all of that, let us introduce ourselves. I am Merve, and joining me today, she wants to give Epona a flaming horn and a fan propeller for extra speed. It's Lovely Bones.
Howdy.
And he insists on spelling melon with two L's just in case it opens up a secret passage. Give a friendly wave to the Kappa.
Hey, yeah, I've actually been reading way too much of that language, and I didn't know. Did you know there were two Elvish languages in Lord of the Rings? Like that was a thing.
There's like Sindarin and one other?
Yeah, and like one is like the secret language that was like banned. And like, man, there's just so much stuff with Lord of the Rings. Like, not in a bad way, but man, it is a lot, you know?
Very rich lore. Very rich lore.
It just keeps coming. Like every time I think I've seen everything I could about some dwarf, there's like, oh, did you read the lost letters published? And it's just like some other like layer of it all, you know? So yeah, I've been living that Lotro Lord of the Rings in general life lately.
It's been like Lord of the Rings for me is something I consumed when I was in like middle school and high school, and I haven't really gone back to it. But now that it's kind of having another cultural moment, I kind of want to revisit it.
Yeah, me too. And that's exactly what happened. What was weird was my wife, I said, hey, give me a copy of this. She works at a library. I said, bring home a copy of the Silmarillion. And she's like, okay. And she got one, and it's like gorgeously illustrated, and like all these like the sides of it are green, and they've got like runes over it. It just looks so cool, like the book itself, you know? So like every night I'm reading. Yeah, but then you read like the Silmarillion, it's kind of dry. You know what I mean? Like it's like reading a history book. And
Tolkien writing dry?
Yeah.
You don't say.
So by the time I get through like some section, I just give it up. But then I go read more and read more and more. But anyway, everybody knows it's Lord of the Rings is great. So
definitely.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Bones.
This is my first episode in almost a year.
Yeah.
Like you can literally see in the Skype right here. Yeah. The last one was recorded in June 2022.
That was around.
Lots happened.
Yeah. E3 sort of still existed back then. Don't exist no more.
Lots happened in the world of what this show is, and a lot's happened in my world. I'm gonna have a house in 2 weeks, man.
Oh wow! Fun. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I get to itemize taxes. That's always fun too. It's the best part of owning a home.
Oh yeah, I've been super lucky. Like whenever I'm doing my taxes, it's just like, do you want to take the standard deduction? Yes, please. I don't even have to worry about that right now. My taxes, I have investments now. My taxes are going to get a lot more complicated.
I paid for the first time ever last year, and this year I got a refund. But the first time I ever paid was last year, and it hurt. It actually hurt. I was like, oh, this is.
And I'm still not clear what my tax situation is as a online freelancer.
Oh yeah, that's a situation where you just like take all your documents to H&R Block. You're like, yo, you do it for me, because I'm not figuring this out myself.
Yeah, well, one of my partners works for H&R Block as a tax prep person, so she did the work that she needed to, as far as I'm aware.
Hey, you got an in. It works. Speaking of games, I actually have kind of been on like now a week-long hiatus from games, because my graphics card is boned. At least I think it's boned.
I am pressing F to pay respects as we speak.
Yeah,
F in the chat.
It's at least it wasn't this time last year or 2 years ago that it happened, because now you can actually get one.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Like the prices have been creeping up back a little bit, but it's still like I'm not going to be paying 1,500 Canadian for a 4080 Ti or 4070 Ti, which is probably what I'd be looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still paying a lot, like it's in the 800 range, but
it's tough. I know we've talked about kind of Nvidia's goals before here, but I think part of it is losing that mid tier, right? Has been really rough for people, and it sounds like it's coming back now, right? They've kind of realized that there's always a line for the 70, but when they try to kind of fart around with the 4070 Ti, but the 4080 was only like $200 more. Then $200 more was the 4090. You really started to lose that middle ground, But it sounds like it's back, and I think the 4070s are pretty cheap right now. But there's a market actually, so
Yeah, I'm debating whether I want to like get that extra juice from the TI because what I currently have is a
mhm,
2080,
mhm.
and I don't know how much of a downgrade. Like, it's not a downgrade to get a 4070 from a
I can just
2080.
tell you personally, I went from a 2080 Ti to a 4080, and I am very happy with that decision. But it's going to be different for everybody, I know, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't
like.
regret mine.
I go, I think, slightly more down market than you generally in my builds. Um,
Mhm,
so that's probably what I'm looking at. 4070, 4070 Ti. So the story here is that I noticed my graphics card was running super hot, and it was like causing my motherboard to beep, which is never good.
mhm.
You never want to hear motherboard beeping. That's like the worst noise you can get coming out of your computer. So like I was like, okay, I have to go in and clean this thing. So like I opened the whole assembly up, cleaned out all the dirt. There was a lot of dirt that had accumulated like on the board and in the heatsink. Um, and then like reapplied the thermal paste, screwed it all back together. Problem is, this thing was really never meant to be disassembled.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
like
I know
you
there
should not have to disassemble these things in general.
when GPUs were getting more and more expensive, you started to see a few more like, hey, send us your GPU and we'll fix it and stuff like that. But that's usually the exception, not the rule. I don't think that that's always, I know rethermal pasting was a thing for a while. It was like, hey, you can get a couple more years out of yours if you need it because cards are ridiculous right now. So that became a little bit more of a thing, but it sounds like you did pretty much everything I think most average PC users could do on their own,
Yeah,
Um,
like I like to be clear for those in the audience who aren't super familiar with PC gaming, 90% of PC gamers would never even try this.
no, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Um,
good
like,
to
and
know.
I am not someone who builds his own PCs in general. I generally get like a pre-built half PC and then I might slot old cards into it. Um, so like I don't even build my own machines from scratch. So me attempting a repair like this is like way beyond my usual skill set.
Yeah, it is. It's way beyond most people's, but like I feel like a lot of that was the desperation of the GPU market a couple years back, and now there's so many things that it's just why don't you just buy a new one? And I think that it was easy when that was the answer for a long time with GPUs. Then it went away, and now it's kind of like, yeah, maybe it comes back, So,
I
um,
I will say my like cleaning and repair um caused like it actually fixed part of the problem. Like now the card runs cooler
mhm.
on like when it's not under load. But when it is under load, it's still reaching the high temperatures and causing the motherboard to beep.
You know,
So that's what makes me suspect it didn't have much to do with uh, dirt and paste. It had a lot to do with the circuitry just being old and
yeah,
running way
and
too hot. There's nothing I can do
one thing
about it.
one thing you brought up too that's so true with like PC gaming and all this other stuff is just like the level of stress some things are. It's why I definitely had that moment where I'm like, I'm done with this. I've had it 100 times. I'm done with this. I'm just gonna either like buy a pre-built next time, or I'm going all console, or it's just for all the joys of building your own. I've been building my own now for 30 years, something a long time. The stress and the why is it doing this and having to dig into weird error codes and stuff like that. It's got to be something you either enjoy or don't. And I do think that there's a part for pretty much every PC gamer where maybe they admit it, maybe they don't, but you are kind of like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. And I've kind of now I've got 4 gaming PCs in my house. So let me tell you, every time like a kid comes upstairs, one of my kids, and he's like, "Hey, my computer won't turn on." It's just like I feel the blood pressure just rise. Like, oh, what is it gonna be?
Because you
Um,
know it's not your kid's fault, most
yeah,
likely. Like you
no,
know it's the hardware, and
yeah.
you can't get mad in front of them because they might not understand that you're mad at the hardware, not them. So you're just like trying to bottle it up.
But like troubleshooting, like you said, like troubleshooting your own PC is tough, but doing somebody else's is like another level. You know what I
Oh
mean? And
yeah.
then because like everybody's got the, oh, I don't know why this thing works like this, but it does. Like it's just weird. But the frustrations that you feel, and I think everybody's been there. You know, it starts to become an issue more and more and more and more when you just like you hit those little brick walls of, well, I've reached the level of what I know to do. What now?
Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of where I'm at right now.
mhm,
Like even putting the graphics card back in, um, it rattles a lot now, or it's like
mhm,
vibrating because I probably just didn't reassemble it 100% like precisely. So I'm guessing there's some wire in there or some connection that's just like
hitting, yeah, the
vibrating,
fan or something.
or it
Yeah.
might be like the fan bearings kind of got messed up when I disassembled everything. Because I
Ugh,
like even disassembled the fan
yeah.
assembly, as I was like really getting in there. Um, and I'm not like that great with my hands, so I just have a loud card right now, and I'm actually not recording. I usually record with a condenser mic, but condenser mics pick up a lot of ambient noise, and you would just hear the rattling off my graphics card.
Oh wow.
So that's why I'm recording with a headset today. Uh, but
It's an interesting problem to have too, because sometimes it's just, I just need to push this thing over the line till things get a little cheaper, or you know what I mean, like I think of all the times to buy, this is kind of like in that weird, like, good not great time though.
yeah,
That's what I would tell people. So like I've always got a lot of friends who, last year I was like, don't buy anything, and then now it's slowly changed into, yeah, now's a good time to buy. So I think if you have to, in worst case scenario, replace some stuff, I think you'll be all right. But the thing I really feel is the frustration that, having to diagnose that, and just it's just the worst, especially when your computer becomes like your primary entertainment box these days. Like it's your Netflix, it's your TV, it's your, it gets a little bit weirder when things just won't work. So I feel you. That's the worst.
yeah, I hadn't actually been playing my Switch or my PS4 much lately,
Hmm.
because like last month I had COVID, so I couldn't like I found it difficult to like sit on my chair and play games.
Hmm.
So like I'd already cut down on gaming last month anyway. And then this month I got back into it with a bunch of games that I'll talk about later. Um, so I've barely been gaming at all for the past week or so. But when I do eventually replace my graphics card, one game that I might actually be able to
All
play
right.
is Immortals of Avium,
Yeah.
whose system requirements were released, I think, a couple of weeks ago now. Uh, at a minimum, requires an RTX 2080 Super. What I
Yeah.
currently have in my rig is an RTX 2080, so I can't even meet the minimum on this rig right now, uh, which is pretty crazy.
I definitely want to talk more about system requirements when we get a little bit further into this, but man, it is shocking what the requirements are for UE5 games. I don't know why. I've always considered UE to be like that commercial ready engine. Does that make sense? Right? Like
Yeah.
it's it's usually like balanced enough so it's looking good, but you're getting the power under it, but it's not going to require the latest and greatest like a Crytek would. Um, so it's kind of interesting to see some of those games now pushing that with UE5. That's the first thing I thought of when I saw those requirements come out.
I would have expected that because at least for UE4, one of the
Hmm.
big things that Epic was pushing was the efficiency gains that
Yep,
you'd get.
exactly. Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like that has happened with UE5.
Hmm.
Like everything that's running on UE5 is just like crazy taxing. I guess maybe people just don't know how to work that well with the new engine yet, and they'll
Yeah,
learn.
it could be that. And I mean, there's always been little weird times in PC gaming where it was like, hey, we're gonna have a physics chip. Do you remember the physics chip was a thing for a while? We're gonna offload the physics of a game from the GPU to this actual chip, or something like that. Or then there was like SLI. Oh, you're gonna get so many improvements. Just buy a second graphics card. Stuff like that. I'm wondering if we're kind of nearing that phase again where they're asking the GPUs, even as beefy and as powerful as they've gotten, to do a little too much with some of these game engines, and there needs to be something that maybe takes a little bit of the burden off. Because when I see the gameplay of Immortals of Avium, and then there's other examples of this too, like what was that? Forspoken, some other games. It looks good, but not like mind melting great, where I would expect it to, require the top of the line that's
Yeah.
currently out there.
Forspoken's a little bit of an interesting case because Forspoken I can actually understand why they require those the high system requirements. Um, Forspoken was built in because you have to move across an open world very, very fast. It's loading and deloading assets extremely quickly.
Hmm.
So either you need to put a whole bunch of stuff in RAM, so you need a lot of RAM, or you have something like an NVMe SSD, and so that way it can read the data super super quickly because reading it off a regular old plate hard drive is just not going to be fast enough for the
Yeah,
game to function. So I kind of understand it in a more in Forspoken's case, like why it had those ludicrous RAM requirements, or get an NVMe SSD. Immortals of Avium, I haven't seen anything that would make me think it can't be like downgraded graphically if need be. And
yeah.
that's why I'm a little confused at these system requirements.
Yeah, and what I've been noticing is at the recommended specs, and I think this is true. I'd have to double look, but I'm betting that the recommended specs is still not 4K and anything higher than probably what 60 frames, something like that. I
I'm
would double
guessing it's
check that.
1440p 60,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm not. I'll have to double check that as well.
But
We'll put it
if
in the
you're,
link dump.
I think the cost analysis thing, where if you're building a monster rig, right, and you're getting just above the recommended specs, that's frustrating. You know what I mean? Like, because who are we building this for then? If I'm not getting, I've never been a frame rate demon. Don't get me wrong. I don't. But I would like it to be pretty solidly above 60, and I think 4K is slowly becoming the standard, or should be, right?
Yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, it's just weird to me that we're seeing recommended specs still at 1440 60, but those recommended specs are like maybe not top of the line, but very close to.
yeah. It's I mean, optimization is hard, and I don't
Mm.
envy anyone whose job it is to do it. Um, but if you're going to put out unoptimized PC ports, uh, like it might be worth the extra, like an extra few months in the oven just to get it working on some
Hmm.
lower spec rigs. But these are functional PC versions that
Yeah,
have
yeah,
ludicrous system requirements. What has kind of been the hallmark of this year in the PC space has been ports are just straight up broken.
yeah,
So there was Last of Us Part 1, which was a disaster, but left us with some hilarious gifs. Star Wars Jedi Survivor more recently. Wild Hearts, which is horribly unoptimized. Wolong Final Fallen Dynasty also had some trouble. There's also Redfall, but that seems to be broken on pretty much every platform.
yeah.
So I don't know how much it's emblematic of this kind of pattern. But like all
The
these,
first,
like these are games from like major studios. We're
right,
talking about
right.
like Naughty Dog, Respawn, Koei Tecmo. Um, who makes
Last
Wolong?
of Us Part One, I think, was to me was the most surprising because
Yeah, for sure.
I that's everybody loves that game. Even the people who hate two, or for whatever weird reasons do hate Last of Us, still think that Part One was great, right? And I think that was what is like a slow pitch softball, hit this thing out of the park type thing, and uh, it was unforgivable the way it launched, And I
That
mean,
part got rushed because the TV show, right? Like,
it could
probably,
have.
probably.
Yeah, that's what I would guess. Yeah.
I just don't know, like, if you're a gamer, if that game's could be any hotter, because even with the TV show or not, people know the game was great. It was 10 out of 10 across, the board.
Yeah.
I would really, I mean, the God of War port was pretty good though. So I don't know. I mean, it could have been rushed, but I think that's the story with so many of the games right now is like, I've never been like, like one of those people who are like, we fix bugs, launch everything bug. I don't think a lot of studios purposely do that, but I think they did that with Redfall. I think they did that with Last of Us.
Mhm.
I don't know about Star Wars, maybe, but I think they were like, just get this shit out the door,
Shippable bug syndrome is a
Yeah.
very real problem
Yeah.
in this
My
industry. It's
guess
been multi-generational at this point.
My guess with Star Wars Jedi Survivor is they wanted it to launch on all platforms on the same day,
Yeah.
and they really probably should have just like taken their lumps and delayed the PC version by a few months.
Yeah, and
Uh,
maybe the Series S version too.
oh, I didn't know the Series S version was broken.
Oh, it's not that bad. I mean, the console versions struggle a little, but I wouldn't say it's like extreme or anything. I don't know, but generally speaking, every Series S version needs more time.
That
Yeah,
used to be a pretty normal release cycle, though. If you think way back in the day, well, not
That's
way
true.
back, but it
That was
used to
very normal.
be get the console stuff out, wait a month or two, and then the PC comes out a month or two later. And I'm fine with going back to that. There's very few games these days that I play where I feel like the spoiling the story would make me less likely to play the game. Does that
heck,
make sense?
they did that with Valkyrie Elysium last year.
Yeah.
PC
Hmm.
version came out 2 months later. Um, so like, hey, maybe that's the right call.
Square Enix showing a good management decision.
Yeah, and apparently the PC port for that game was okay. So
Cool.
like, maybe we should do that instead of whatever they did with like Wild Hearts or Jedi Survivor. That's like 2 L's for EA. That's
Yeah.
real bad.
But that used to just be a normal thing of development. Hey, the PS2 version is going to come out. Wait 6 months, then the PC one will come out, and we were fine with it.
I'm so soft on technical stuff, which is why I've been so quiet in this particular subject. But I yeah, I mean it sucks. It sucks that we've been in this kind of circumstance for as long as we have in this industry, and I think not much is improving about it.
It's weird because I think this connects a lot to like how I've been feeling about Netflix weirdly, where like I'm I don't like I'm non-committal to a lot of Netflix shows because I just feel like as soon as I get into them, it's gonna get canceled, or like it doesn't feel like it's as secure of something to enjoy, right? And I've kind of gotten that with PC games. I've never really been a what do they call them, patient gamer. I've never really been that. I used to buy AAA every single time, every release, everything else. I was trying to think. Just last year, I bought so few at release AAA games compared to. I'm not talking like DLCs or expansions, but like brand new releases because so many times it's like, let me see if this is any good. Let me see if it's if it'll run. Let me see if it's a bad port or to wait or if there's going to be you know month one patches that fix all the problems. And as somebody who used to just buy sight unseen, that feels weird. It's I
It's
don't know.
it's a shift for sure.
Yeah.
And I made that mistake this year. I bought at least one AAA release right when it came out. And then I was sitting there waiting for them to patch in an FOV slider. Uh, I barely got anything out of
That
it for the
FOV,
first
yeah,
couple of
I
weeks.
kind of
Um,
how I ended up getting banned from a game. So it's an interesting story, but yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes the community comes up with fixes, and then you start to run things, and yeah, you find out it's not so legal. But um,
oops.
yeah, there's a lot that goes on, I think, with development out, and I think COVID was a reason for many years, right? And I still
Yeah.
think COVID is probably a reason, but also
Of
think
course.
COVID's starting maybe to become more of an excuse a little bit, and I think that's a real shame. I think there's probably, nobody wants to go back to the office. I get it, but I'm hoping that some of these workflows and experiences and stuff, whatever's making these games just not pass muster, get figured out, and I don't know. I've never developed a game at a AAA level, obviously, so I don't know what pros and cons are of being in studio, or in everybody in one building, and the sound guy can go ask the art guy what's supposed to happen here type stuff. But it's just disappointing. I
My
just feel disappointed so often now in games, and it's not a good feeling.
my guess as far as workflows go is that like if you had an established in-office workflow that was fairly rigid and then you had to go remote, it can take a while for the,
Hmm.
the culture of
Sure.
the
Yeah.
workflow to shift. Whereas if you're kind of flexible from the get-go, if your studio that has kind of a lot of outside collaboration or had a mixture of remote and on-site work to begin with, um, then it probably wasn't that big a shift
Hmm.
to go more remote and then come back to hybrid. Um, but again, I don't work in that industry, so hard for me to say. One last
Yeah,
thing I'll.
like
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
have I have a developer source who will speak very highly of her experiences with remote work, but also that's one developer in a industry of hundreds of thousands of workers.
Yeah, there are going to be lots of
It's
different
yeah.
perspectives on this for
I,
sure.
I think I think where I come down on this is that like the principle of remote work is worth like trying to let something give in other places. And
Yeah,
I mean, capitalism would love to scapegoat it over other things, and that sucks. But I'm not going to say that there has been no flaws or compromises that have come from remote work either. I'm not going to be that Pollyanna about it,
yeah.
Um,
At the end of the
like
day, like ultimately, regardless of whether remote work is advantageous or disadvantageous for the project, ultimately the bottom line is that managers' decisions to let the
yeah,
thing out the door, regardless of what the workflow is to begin with.
yeah,
So, like, it's on them at the end of the day.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
EA didn't want to delay Jedi Survivor again,
Yeah,
probably. Like,
yeah,
and
for sure.
I think I think Phil Spencer. I think it's tough because yeah, he's corporate, but I think I've generally had a pretty decent opinion. But he did kind of hold Arcane a bit to the fire, and just kind of was like, this isn't acceptable. This is not okay with us, Um, I don't know. I mean, at
yeah,
some
Yeah,
point,
but
probably should have done that while the game was
yeah,
still in
yeah,
development, though, right?
yeah. The flip side of that is like, there's been enough insider stories on Xbox at this point that we understand like they're extremely hands off unless they're like given an emergency reason to not treat their developers hands off, basically, right? Like it has to be as bad as like Halo Infinite post launch or whatever,
yeah.
for them
I'm
to really
betting.
seriously intervene. And that like that's as far as I can tell the case with Redfall. They didn't talk to they let Arcane just do their thing up until basically right before launch, and then they're like, "Hey, wait a second,"
Yeah, because
and
the first thing
that's on you for not taking notice sooner. It's not
Yeah,
on you for not wanting to help sooner.
the first thing they announced was like, hey, it's going to run at what is it, like 30 FPS,
yeah,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
new
What
gen,
I've
and
what I've what I've heard was that them announcing that it can only have 30 FPS at launch and not 60 FPS like was what caused Xbox to like actually
yeah.
start talking to them, which is
Like,
insane.
wait a minute,
Yeah.
yeah.
But again, don't do that literally weeks before launch.
Yeah, that it's a tough spot for everyone to be in, I think. And I don't want to make excuses, but I mean, who knows? They could eventually get Redfall to where it was, but
Mm,
I've had my gripes with Arcane before. I don't think that they are 100% never miss devs. But you know, um, Redfall's an embarrassment when that's your big release almost for the whole first half of the year.
mm.
And it hits like a brick.
It was a very high pressure spotlight put on them
Mhm.
to take this game that they were working on for a couple of years before Xbox bought them, and that it was kind of blatantly okay. I have to acknowledge this quickly, even though no one else will probably remember this. Merv basically called out the problems of Redfall from a design perspective, like as soon as it got revealed, and I was very naive about it. I was willing to believe like, oh yeah, sure, I can buy. They can have a balance between co-op and in-sim. No, you can't. But but I
um,
wanted to believe, and I've had these couple of circumstances where I've been too naive about the
I mean,
industry.
I will
So
say on
I
that
want to give you
point,
that point, Merv.
I will say on that point, I think sometimes, like, if you're excessively cynical at everything, eventually you're going to be right about something. So I
Sure.
don't think I had any great insight here. I was just, and I don't think it's a wholly like impossible idea. I just thought that it's something that requires a lot of thought to go into design to implement, and I wasn't
Yeah.
confident that Arcane would get there, and that lack of confidence did turn out to be correct. But
Yeah.
it's perfectly plausible that I could have been too cynical about this.
That's valid. I mean, I also think they should trying to still be an MSIM and be co-op and be a loot shooter and be open world. Like that's too many things.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Fucking have the number of things you're trying to do. When especially when you're Arcane and you're already like kind of stretching yourselves thin a lot of the time. Like yeah, there's no one one reason why that game is such a problem game, unfortunately. But yeah, probably.
Yeah, it is. It is a shame, and I don't
It
think
is
it
a
would have
shame.
had to shoulder so much of the burden if
Mm.
Microsoft had perhaps had a more regular release cadence.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
they were more
Yeah.
robust with their internal development, if you know, if
Because they've
fucking
had a
any.
lot of like double A W's,
Mhm.
right? They've
Yeah,
had like the
Pentiment.
past year, like Pentiment, Grounded, Hi-Fi Rush, all great games.
Mm.
Yep.
But then when you kind of put the spotlight on this, it's on its own in late
Yeah.
spring. Um, it does influence the narrative, and
Yeah.
I want to be really clear here. Um, Gamers don't consume narrative in the sense that like I can't play an annual report with a controller.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't think it matters that much, but it is going to shape
Mm-hmm.
what the discourse is surrounding Xbox for the next
Mm-hmm.
however many months until Starfield comes out.
Yeah,
Um,
it amplifies their already weak position right now, and yeah, does that mean everything in the long term? Of course not, but
yeah.
Yeah.
it has an effect right now, unfortunately. Um, yeah, hey, yeah, maybe if you guys had fucking if one of all those big name AAA games that they announced at the start of the gen, if one of those had gone a little smoother and was able to show a little more up to this point, or let alone be able to be ready to be released
Well,
for whatever reason.
maybe one of those games will be announced at Summer Games Fest, which is happening at the start of June.
Good
Um,
transition, but I for the record, I doubt it.
which is happening at the start of June. Almost you could say in place of E3, which was canceled this year.
Yes.
Um,
Jeff Keighley assassinated E3. He took a knife to their throat.
he just took it out back behind the woodshed. He pulled out that chip and he was like straight across the throat, E3.
Mhm.
Um,
No, they E3 killed themselves. Come on, we all know this at this point.
yeah, like I want to be again a little careful about drawing too strong a conclusion here. In that, um, if circumstances had aligned slightly differently, I think we'd be talking about in a few months from now. We'd be talking about how there was a pretty anemic E3 that happened this year, but it did happen. Um,
Hmm.
like just a few things had changed. E3 probably would have gone ahead, but I don't think it was in a very strong position.
Hmm.
Uh, what seems to be the case is ReedPop was just slow on getting things organized, so potential exhibitors just didn't know what was happening and weren't
Hmm.
100% confident that everything was going to go ahead. ReedPop wasn't very communicative. Uh,
Reed Pop was unprepared as like just kind of being brought into this abruptly. And that's also on the ESA. The ESA didn't help Reed Pop be ready for this situation. And then and then there's the deeper stuff. There's the fact that like a lot of partners have been burned by the ESA multiple times in the past few years, and it's going to take
including,
more. It's going to take more than just like bringing Reed Pop in to earn that trust back.
yeah, including
Yeah.
like game journos who were
Yes, we got doxxed
effectively
several times.
doxxed by
Several times.
the ESA. Um, no one at the ESA works full time on E3. Like it's just
Yeah.
everyone there has other jobs.
Right.
Um, on the publisher side, it so happened that this time around they didn't have stuff ready to show off. It was either
Mhm.
stuff that was really close to release, for which they already kind of had their marketing machine going, or stuff that they weren't ready to show trailers or demo footage for that was coming out later.
Yeah.
So
And
just
then
timing wise, it didn't work.
and the talking point that we've had in previous years of that for a lot of these smaller partners or less financially solvent. Am I using that word correctly? Whatever. The less the more fiscally challenged publishers like your Ubisofts or whatever. Like these guys. There's less and less of an incentive to pay an exorbitant fee to get an extra like distributor um, to your presentation that you can already digitally produce and release by yourself anyway.
Yeah, live
Yeah.
streaming has changed the game.
Yeah.
The ROI on doing like paying several $1 million for a booth at
Yeah.
E3 just isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
The the views may have been in on E3 2021, but the publishers did not consider it a strong enough return on investment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think E3 will continue to
Yeah, I
exist.
seriously thought it.
I think.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
don't you think part of it too was that E3 kind of was a victim of like its own weird success where it had to keep going bigger and bigger and bigger, and you had to win it, you had to be the one who sucked all the air out of the room. Um, I think that was kind of self-inflicted in some ways on some of the E3 stuff because where do you go? How do you get all the eyes on you when it's such a crowded room, especially with some of the weird stuff they were doing?
See,
Um,
E3 is actually
it's
like fluctuated in size over the years
right.
and has gone
Yeah.
tiny some years in between. Um, but I do like you're right in that I think there was an expectation not necessarily of more spectacle, but of having bigger and bigger announcements at the conferences.
Yeah.
Like to try to like that kind of gamesmanship, I think eventually it reaches the breaking point where you can't go bigger in terms of announcements just
Right.
because the
Right.
lineup of your console or your publisher is just not going to allow for that. You can't like bend reality around the presentation.
You would never be able to do the Fallout announcement ever again. Yeah, at an E3. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
the circumstances that are required for that to line up,
yeah,
um, like it's pretty crazy. Like the only reason, say, like that Hi-Fi Rush Shadow Drop worked for Microsoft was because they intended to release it in January.
mhm.
Like probably the money wouldn't have been there to like delay it all the way till June and drop it on the E3 stage, right?
Yeah.
That's so, yeah. Timing wise of E3 is always so tough. I mean, I think the idea used to be you would pitch it or you would announce it at E3 and it'd be ready for Christmas, but that hasn't been that way in forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not E3's fault. That's the industry's fault. That's
Right. Yeah.
AAA
Games just got
production's
bigger and
fault.
bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah.
Um, One last thing I'll mention about this. One of the wildest things about ReadPop, which is otherwise a company that organizes like fan conventions and conferences, their parent company is a company called Relics. Relics has one other like major arm known as Elsevier. Elsevier is one of the biggest publishers of academic literature in the world. Like
Oh,
chances are, if you
they're
have
gross.
read an academic journal article, which you probably did like in undergrad once, or if you went to grad school, you probably read a whole bunch. You have definitely read a text that Elsevier has published at some point in your life.
Huh.
Um, so like, I think this is wild. The same company that puts on New York Comic Con and PAX also like publishes cancer research.
Yeah. Well, so many of those, that's been such a scummy field for so long, right? Because you have to pay to publish and all that other weird stuff. And they
Uh,
get the free peer reviewing
oh
basically.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Oh,
so,
don't get me
so
started
corrupt.
on academic publication.
It's
It's a
Let's get
horrible.
him started,
scummy,
guys.
scummy business.
It really is. It's like a mafia. It's like that level of like, you know, free to print money stuff because I've definitely heard many, many, many stories about it.
Uh, let's just say, like, I went to grad school. I got a couple of publications. I am in agony every day that one of them is in an Elsevier journal. So, like,
Part of the problem.
I'm part of the problem, but I'm not publishing it anymore. So, double middle fingers to
Yeah, get them.
Elsevier. But what is kind of taking the place of E3 this year is Summer Game Fest, which is Jeff Keighley's rival event to E3 that knifed in the back behind the shed, as we mentioned earlier. Uh, and it's obviously not as big as E3. It's not filling all the same niches. Yes, there
Yeah.
will be press on site, some demos and press events for journalists, but it's not going to be like a full-on conference with a show floor, as far as I know. Um,
It can't truly and fully replace E3 for what it represents, but it also doesn't need to. Like,
exactly.
as long as it does its job enough of of delivering these news marketing events to audiences, and then keeping publishers satisfied on their side of things, then it's just gonna keep chugging where E3 fucking imploded.
Yeah, so basically imagine E3, I guess, without the show floor, and that is essentially what we're getting from Summer Games Fest, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine with me.
I
Because
don't mind
what am
that.
I there for in the end? I'm there
Yeah.
for the conferences.
Yeah, we were getting the fucking demos anyway.
And as long as, yeah, that news does trickle out to
Mm,
journalists who will then relay it to us, I'm fine with it.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, so what's confirmed so far? They'll have a kickoff presentation. IM8-Bit and Double Fine are doing their annual Day of the Devs presentation,
Mm-hmm.
which showcases indie games. Xbox is doing a showcase, and Ubisoft is doing a showcase. There might be other partner showcases announced later. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, what do you think we're going to see at these conferences?
Oh boy. Well, I think it's safe to say that most of the partners that have been announced, that just got announced like days before we're recording this, most of those partners will just be featured in the single kickoff presentation video.
Yeah,
Yeah, there will be relatively few dedicated presentations. Thank God.
I just don't want them to do what they do for PC Game Fest every year, where
Mhm.
they like it's not PC Game Fest, the PC gaming show that PC Gamer
Yeah.
puts on, where they like go through these mind-numbingly boring interviews, um,
Yeah.
where I'm just like, I respect you, I know you want to get your message out there, but this is so long. This is 3 hours. As
Yeah.
long as Keeley keeps it tight, which I think he can,
Yeah.
I think it'll be
I
fine.
think I think he's been keeping it tight okay so far. Yeah. Some segments run long, but you know,
Keeps
you're
it tight in
always
the
gonna be
presentation, keeps it tight in the fashion department too. He's got the whole blazer thing going.
sure. Yeah.
He's got the nice kicks. I appreciate someone who can rock Converse in a suit. Um,
Mm.
but like in terms of what we're going to see games wise, I this is going to be what they reveal the new Call of Duty officially, right? Like it's
Oh, of
got to
course.
be.
Yeah. No, Call of Duty has no interest in marketing anywhere outside of Keelyverse and Sony events up until that contract expires next year. Um,
Yeah. So we'll
yeah.
see. We know it's Modern
Uh,
Warfare 3. I'm guessing it's
yeah.
3 in Roman numerals instead of Arabic numerals
Mhm.
this time around.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, but wild that they've got two games called Modern Warfare 3. Uh, not that far apart as well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, they've crossed that bridge already.
so many times.
um.
Like there's no
Yeah.
excitement
Let's
for
see.
this year's Call of Duty as far as I can tell. Like when was the
Mm,
last time people were
no.
really excited for Call of Duty? Was it Cobble Ops 4? I don't know.
Um. Truly palpable excitement. Yeah, I couldn't fucking tell you, but I mean, Modern Warfare 2 did fine last year, right? It did a lot better
Yeah.
than Vanguard. So, um,
Oh yeah, Vanguard was a thing. That was a game that
God, yeah,
existed.
that
I completely forgot about it.
Vanguard being such a disaster got me so excited. Did got my hopes up too much for sinking that ship.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I'll admit, I'm not the audience for Call of Duty. I've tried a couple, not my thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but still a juggernaut that whose existence we have to acknowledge. Um,
of course.
I would bet that. I mean, I'm not. It's not a losing bet. Annapurna's new game is going to be there. We'll probably see more of
Yes.
open roads. My guess is part of the reason for that Steve Gaynor blog post that came out a few days ago.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
guessing that it was
that
anticipating
news
this.
that news could have been delivered at any time since the open road stuff first went public 2 years ago, but they timed it to now for a reason probably.
Uh, my guess is that there are some legal issues involved,
Yeah, I would guess
because
that too.
Gaynor
Sorry.
owns
Yeah, I didn't
Fulbright.
mean to overstate that. Yeah, but
Yeah, so I mean, I'm guessing it probably
probably,
could have been announced earlier, for sure.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it probably takes a while from that
of
first
course.
report by
Do we want
people
to
make
put into a
games.
context what we're talking about, just in case?
Yeah, so I believe as people make games that reported on allegations of um,
Like a
abuse,
hostile work advice?
yeah, hostile
Yeah.
work environment that Steve Gaynor, the owner of
Yeah.
Fulbright, had created in his studio. Uh, Fulbright was working on a game for Annapurna called Open Roads,
It was
starring.
also it was Nicole Carpenter at Polygon first, actually.
Oh, okay, right. I'm
Yeah.
confusing it with the report on
Yeah.
Phenomena. My bad.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. People Make Games included Fulbright in that video, but that wasn't the first time that the Fulbright stuff had been publicly reported on.
Okay,
Yeah, that was
excellent.
Phenomena.
Thanks for keeping me honest. Um, yeah, so that's what went down. Open Roads
Yeah.
was like this highly anticipated
The
upcoming game from the makers of
third game from
yeah
Gone Home. Yeah.
Gone Home and Tacoma, starring Kerry Russell and was it Caitlin Dever the other one?
Caitlin Dever. Yes.
Caitlin.
Yeah, and it was
Okay,
a
my
Game
memory did
Awards
serve me correctly because I didn't look that
announcement
up.
trailer.
Um, so yeah, that's what had been going on there.
Mhm.
Um, the future of that game had been uncertain for a while. It was kind of stated they were going to continue working on it, but no public announcement on in what capacity. And now, very recently, Steve Gaynor said he's left the project. He, being the owner of Fulbright, is keeping Fulbright as a name, and the team that was left is rebranded as the Open Roads team, and they're the
Yeah.
folks developing Open Roads now.
Yeah, they've self-divested so that it's easier to get new staff again.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough because I
Basically,
feel
because
like
the Fulbright name became toxic once those reports came out.
we've been dealing with this with kind of like a circle of indie studios or indie
Mm-hmm.
developers, just
Yeah.
kind of figuring out because they become our darlings and they're the ones who are doing
Yeah,
the stuff
look
we
at the
wish.
Ori guys. Jesus
And
Christ.
it's just been one thing after another, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's disappointing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, like we mentioned, Moon Studios, that Bones had brought up. On a lot of these studios, as Mountains, Fulbright, Phenomena, they're all linked to Annapurna. Um, and I think kind of the common link here is this publisher that wants to work with these auteurs and that
Mhm.
itself is kind of rooted in almost a toxic Hollywood kind of mentality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
that
Annapurna
is
has
just like
its
turning a blind eye to all of this.
yeah, exactly. Has its cultural problems rooted in this in an outdated version of the concept of auteur theory. And on top of that, a more generally like overly hands-off approach to its partners, which we talked about that with Xbox earlier. You can't be like being too hands-off can be just as harmful as being too hands-on for a publisher.
Doesn't it kind of seem like it's a little bit of a switch for like we used to like hate the EAs, we used to hate the Microsofts, right? And then we love these little indies,
Oh,
but now
I still hate those corporations too.
but
We
it,
can hate. There's so much hate to go around.
yeah, but
hate
it does
everyone.
feel like maybe in some ways they're kind of like a necessary evil to keep maybe some of these like auteurs who become little, office gremlins in line, right? Like,
I don't like.
Up
It
to a point,
depends.
like
From
Xbox got to look good with the Moon Studios story by cutting them off,
Mhm.
but
and I don't think they
no,
announced
it's
that
way
that's
more
why they
complicated.
cut them off. I think that was dug up after the fact,
yeah,
right?
for
Is
every
okay.
Yeah.
Microsoft dropping Moon Studios, there's 2K continuing to finance Ken Levine's studio.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
Exactly.
exactly.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, who knows
Or
in the end?
for that matter, like the State of Decay studio, which situation's not looking great on, but it's not so extreme that it's gotten as much attention, I think, as some other stuff.
Yeah, that report ended up really weird.
Yes, it did.
Because like
Yeah, guy getting so defensive about a relatively mild, by this industry standards, expose.
Yeah, and it's every studio's had one. I mean, even Bungie, when they had theirs, and it was like, hey, there's basically this guy on the lore team who's out of control, and they fired him. But I think it's good. It's like letting the sunlight in a lot of ways, But it's just, eh, I've learned really to not fall in love with studios anymore
Yeah.
because they're gonna burn you.
Yeah, don't hero worship, guys.
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially don't hero worship corporations. Hi. Uh, the
So
speaking as the person who was like defined as Nintendo fan by her appearances on this podcast for a long time, and then spent several consecutive months covering Nintendo of America being a hellhole.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
important. You can be a fan of output and still understand the circumstances under which it was made and why those
Exactly.
can be
Of course.
problematic.
Yeah.
Any other predictions we have for Summer Games Fest kickoff? Or
Um,
I,
so Mortal Kombat 12 slash Mortal Kombat spoiler alert 1 is probably gonna be there, or it might be a standalone trailer, or it might be at the PlayStation Showcase. I don't know.
I mean, Warner Brothers is one of the partners, so
I
Yes, they are.
I have kind of a broader guess, but I think this is kind
Oh,
of
I've also
where.
heard Dreadwolf might be as SGF. Sorry.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like there's going to be kind of. I think it's time again for an esports revival. I feel like it's the thing that we haven't pushed in a while. Those orgs are all losing money, right? Um, most of the
Overwatch League is a toilet.
Yeah, a lot of them have folded, but where there's been this glimmer of hope, right, is now what's happening is a lot of content creators, right, are buying esports teams. And I feel like there's going to be a push for some sort of like content creator mishmash esports thing. That's my guess. I don't know why, but I've just been hearing like a lot of these streamers basically talking about wanting to get into owning an esports org, how complicated it is, how corporate it all is, stuff like that. So like if you want to own a CS:GO team, it's not like money gets you in the door. They want to make it feel like you're owning a sports team, you know. So there's lots of headaches being involved. So I wouldn't be too surprised if somebody like Riot with Valorant or somebody else starts to kind of make an esports league that's maybe less focused around a bunch of like 18 19-year-old kids winning it and more about pitting your favorite content creators against each other, if that makes sense. There's been a lot of movement with content creators buying esports teams. I think Ludwig, he's a very big streamer, owns one. Moist Critical owns one, another very big streamer. So I think my guess is going to be some type of esports announcement at Summer Games Fest, because I think that's what they're going to have to position themselves as, to be a little bit different. If they're not getting some of the big name studios, what else are we going to get? And I think the content creators are easy money to get.
I'm trying to see who, like, which of these partners could conceivably be in esports.
That I
Uh,
think Riot. I think Riot with
Riot's not
yeah.
partnered
Oh,
with
they're not.
SGF, which is why, I was curious. Like, I would guess definitely like a Valorant team, like
Yeah.
league, with a lot of creator owners. Sure, um, I would guess that could definitely happen. I don't know if it's going to be announced at SGF though, because I'm just looking at what's on their list of partners,
Mhm.
and like,
I mean, Call of Duty. You know, I
oh yeah,
mean,
for sure, you
they could
definitely do.
always, because Call of Duty's always wanted an esports scene, and they've got the eyeballs, but they've never really had anybody ever take that seriously, you know. But they've definitely tried that forever. So I don't know, maybe, but
Yeah,
I've
I
been
could see Capcom pushing harder on their FGC stuff. Question mark.
definitely because I
yeah,
know a lot of the same content creators who own teams and sponsor esports teams have been saying how frustrated they are where the big name fighting games are Nintendo, which is a headache to deal with, and a lot of all these other companies that are basically shutting down left and right. They shut down. What was it called at the summit? The big fighting competition kind of shut down for various reasons, and yeah, I could see even Mortal Kombat getting more of a little push to be included in the fighting game world.
yeah. FGC's always had this like really uneasy relationship with the publishers of the games they play,
Hmm.
Yeah,
um, because
outright
they've been a lot
antagonistic at
more.
times. And
Yeah,
I don't just mean Nintendo, even.
yeah. I think something we forget sometimes when we talk about the FGC and the relationship with Nintendo. FGC is very grassroots, which can be good insofar as it means that everything's very community driven, and it kind of keeps corporations out of decisions that hamper the community. But on the other hand, because it's so grassroots and not like corporate sanitized, a lot of bad stuff happens behind the scenes,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Mhm.
like it creates this vicious cycle where companies don't want to partner with these super independent organizations because these organizations have shown themselves incapable of policing themselves, and so you end up with this kind of
Mhm.
really like really like problematic pattern where uh, like no one wants to work with anyone else and no one wants to like clean house where needed. But Yeah.
But I mean, to get to what each is gonna announce, I really don't know. I really don't know.
I
I
mean,
think you've got
like,
some good guesses, but
moving on to Xbox, we've got to see the new
yeah,
game from Compulsion, right?
yeah,
How long ago
absolutely,
Yeah.
did Microsoft buy Compulsion?
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of unknown Microsoft projects still out there, what they even are. I think this has got to be the year they start to deliver something.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I was supposed to talk about Xbox, right? Okay, yeah. I mean, what we know the Starfield showcase, of course. Right.
Yeah.
yep.
That's the gimme. The question is whether they can deliver literally anything else of substance. So as far as I know, the things that are closest to being ready to show / ready to launch after Starfield are Hellblade 2 and Avowed, but I don't.
I
Avowed
think
especially has been messy. Hellblade 2 has been, I think, going fine, but Avowed has been messy, so that probably is getting pushed again,
I
if
wonder
I had
how
to guess.
I wonder how much of the air gets sucked out of the room between those two kind of not being similar, but Avowed is still your kind of like, you know, RPG-ish, you know, action RPG it look like. I don't know, who knows what it ends up being, but I don't know which one if they're going to end up being a little bit of a let's get one out not the other type thing. I'm just not as excited about Avowed because I don't know anything about it. You know, if it's a Souls game, I'm gonna be really fucking disappointed.
It's not a Souls game. I can
That's-
tell you that right now, man.
I would
No,
be
it's
so
not,
fucking
not
annoyed.
Souls like. I will always take more Souls likes, but it's not Souls like.
I hope it's an
seriously
Alpha
doubt if the
Protocol like.
initiative.
That's what I
That'd be
Yeah,
want.
cool.
Steampunk
same.
Alpha Protocol.
I would
Yeah.
gladly take an Alpha Protocol like. But yeah. That's what I'd say. Probably Hellblade 2. Maybe if we're lucky about. Don't fucking count on Perfect Dark or Fable or any of the ones you actually care about.
Yeah.
I was
I,
definitely not going to count a Perfect Dark. That thing,
Yeah, everyone knows Perfect Dark's a shit show.
I
that thing's
feel yeah. So is Rare even still making Perfect Dark, or is it that other
Oh
team?
no,
Rare
Rare
was
was
never
never
making it to begin with.
Oh, okay, okay.
Perfect Dark was a studio. I forget their names right now, but
The
a studio
Initiative.
the Xbox, the Initiative. Thank you, the Initiative. The Xbox
Oh,
founded
that's right, that's
Perfect
right.
Dark
The
specific,
Gears people,
and
And
kind
they're
of.
now
partnering with
Yep.
Crystal Dynamics.
Yep.
and Crystal Dynamics has been running the show on Perfect Dark primarily at this point because the Initiative was a mess. Yeah, it turns
Yeah.
out these startup studios are not like particularly functional.
Yeah, also
Yeah.
turns out that you can't develop a AAA game with only like 30 people.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, yes, yeah, their team was tiny.
And then, like, I mean, there's other things. We might see something new from an Exile because they haven't.
Oh, sure. Yeah, We Sent 3 was a while ago.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
Double
love that
Fine's
game
been
too.
working on stuff. They
Yeah,
had, like, I think they have 3 games in development rumored. Um,
that sounds right.
State of Decay 3 was announced a while back. We might see something there.
Hmm.
And maybe a teaser for the upcoming Indiana Jones game, I would guess.
Oh, yeah, actually, I think that's plausible. Yeah, I could see Indiana Jones, but nothing substantial.
Yeah, I would guess just a teaser, like a little trailer, maybe
Yeah,
something cinematic, maybe like like 5 seconds snippet
I'm
of gameplay footage, but nothing
Bunch
like.
of
I'm still
music and they show his
I'm
hat
still
or
I'm
something.
still mad that there's clearly gonna be no like proper Wolfenstein 3. That bums me out so much.
I heard a rumor they were
Uh,
working on one, but I'm not
okay.
sure.
It seems unlikely to me, but hey, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'd love to be wrong. Speaking of things I'd love to be wrong about, my understanding is that there's a new Banjo Kazooie with some external partners developer working on it. I don't think that's ready to show yet, but I'd be happy to see that.
Sure, I'd be down. I
Would
don't
be
even like
nice.
the first
Yeah.
Banjo Kazooie, but I want another
What
3D
the
platformer.
good one?
I don't like either. I mean, maybe
Okay,
that's
okay.
why.
Well, you know
Maybe
what?
that's why I
That's
didn't
fine.
like Ukulele because it was just a worse version of something I didn't
Didn't you
like
like
to begin with.
Yeah,
super
if you
back it
already
though?
don't like that one, then that's fine. I give you more power to that because I have problems with that game still. But if
Sorry,
you
Kappa.
like Tui and not Kazooie, then go fuck yourself.
I didn't even play Tui.
That's the official opinion of the podcast, by
I
the way.
I'm just gonna clarify. I've never played more than like 5 seconds of Tui.
Okay, good for you. You're better off for it. No, Rare has made as many bad games as good ones. Let's be real about that.
Sir Kappa, what were you saying earlier?
I thought you were pretty. Weren't you like a super backer for ukulele? Didn't you like?
No, no, I
Oh,
didn't back
okay.
that one at all.
Okay.
The game I backed was A Hat in Time, which turned
That's
out
it.
very
Yeah.
well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. You played the shit out of that game. Yeah, I know that
I
one.
still need to play that game. but
It's
I've
pretty
never
good.
decided which console version I wanted to get.
Any other thoughts on what Xbox could be up to?
Something.
I think we
Just
were pretty fucking comprehensive, frankly,
you know what's
on first
weird
party
is
shit.
as bad as this has been for Xbox, I still don't regret Game Pass or my Xbox. I still
Oh,
don't.
sure.
I think
What?
that's weird.
Yeah. My
It's
Series X is my primary console
me
right
too.
now, and
Yeah.
it has been for quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can play a
Um,
third party right now and it's not a like a PC-ish type game, I just play it on my Xbox. I don't regret it.
yeah.
So, I know it seems like there's a lot of like ink being spilt this past month about like, we lost this generation, I think, or something like that, and it
Again,
seems a little dire.
that's
I think there's some overreacting, and I think there's some fair understanding of like that it's like I'd say they're in a better position than they were at this point compared to Xbox One.
Oh, definitely, yeah, 100%.
That's not an easy that's not a hard hurdle to jump, granted, but they are.
yeah.
But they're all facing a lot of difficulties right now with now as soon as PS5s became easily purchasable, they just rocketed ahead of Xbox on the
See,
hardware charts.
the thing is for Xbox, like as I
The
mentioned
first
earlier,
party is not
gamers don't.
the state of first party is not great. Sorry, go ahead, Mike Murph. Yeah,
Yeah, what I was saying is like as I mentioned earlier, gamers don't consume narrative. At the end of the day, we play
sure.
games, and if there are games on Game Pass for you, then great.
Yeah,
That deal works out for you. For me personally, like Microsoft to me is not a console manufacturer. To me, they're a publisher.
Yeah.
Because I just play all
right.
their, I don't own an Xbox. I play all their games on PC, and I only really care about the state of Microsoft to the extent that they continue to publish games that I'm interested in.
At the same time, yeah.
So
Yeah,
like, for me, all this like doom and gloom, I understand why someone who owns that console and is heavily invested in its future and wants to play lots and lots of exclusives might be a little concerned. But for me, who just sees Microsoft as a publisher, oh, they put out a game I like, cool, I'll play it. Right? If not, well,
Um,
I got other games to play.
I
you know, go ahead.
my generational plan long term has always been that I was going to have all three consoles and no PC. So I'll be relatively fine no matter what. But yeah, speaking as someone who only has a Series X for current gen right now, like yeah, it can be a bit frustrating.
Yeah,
One thing you
But
mentioned
yeah,
earlier, Merv,
the state of first party is struggling. But yeah, yeah,
is
it's a complicated issue.
sorry,
at the
Kappa, go ahead.
same at one thing you mentioned earlier, at the same time as like there's been this weird rise in the double A, Microsoft has Game Pass and it's just chock full of like double A. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Yeah,
And like they're hitting
some
it
of
out
the
of the
double A
park.
is crap,
Right, right.
granted, but
But like a
I tried
hi-fi
fucking
rush.
Ravenlock a couple days ago. I'm so sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
Um,
sorry, Kappa, you're
yeah,
saying about the
But
double A on Game Pass?
yeah, so I mean like when you're getting 10 double A's out, or let's say like 5 a month double A's are
yeah,
hitting on Game Pass, the value feels so much better because I'm going, well shit, I would have bought this game for $20 and my Game Pass this month was 13, so I've saved money, you know what I mean?
sure,
And so like the value proposition is still really there.
yeah.
It's just they haven't swung for the fences on the triple A's and really hit, but the double
Mhm.
A's, there's almost something every single month that I'll at least check this game out.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's very fair, especially if you're still getting your Game Pass at a discount like I am.
yeah, I think I've got like 3 years for like $1 or something. But then they
Yeah.
went back and stuck like Quantum Break on there. That's a fun game. Ghostwire Tokyo, I think, hit this
Mhm.
month. I mean,
Yeah.
the little nods that they're doing, and they get just enough of those PC kind of Total Warhammer and those types of games, I think, to really punch up the value if you've got the God, I can't remember the name of it. Premium or Ultra or Ultimate or whatever the hell it is.
Game
The
Pass Ultimate.
PC Plus. Yeah. I think that's a really
Ultimate,
good
yeah.
deal. Yeah, I think it's always because I've seen a lot of like I think it's like I don't know if it's PC Gamer or Kotaku, but one of the two has been doing a lot of articles about like Game Pass sucks now because they're not hitting triple A's. And I disagree. I think it's still very good. And I don't know if like Merv says, if Microsoft says, you know what, this publisher stuff might be the future. Download an Xbox app, forget an Xbox console, and just
Yeah.
go get our Game Pass, right?
Yeah, well, they better not say that until next
Yeah.
generation. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Be kind to me, man.
So one last conference that I just wanted to briefly get some thoughts out about is
Mm.
Ubisoft.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm never enthusiastic to talk about Ubisoft because, well,
And
you know,
what's fun to talk about with
the
Ubisoft,
chemo of it all.
even even if you don't talk about the workplace stuff, like I don't know, yeah, I just see nothing to talk about with those games anymore.
I mean,
But
I will say, and full disclosure, we did interview a developer from Massive Entertainment on this podcast. But I am
okay,
excited for Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora because I
Me
like the
too.
world of
yeah, I
Pandora.
saw that.
I'm
Yeah.
super into Avatar. I'm not joking. I really like something about that second movie really hit.
Oh
I'm like,
no, I'm
oh,
surrounded.
I was like, oh shit, this has got some legs to it. I was really into it.
I didn't see
Um,
that movie in the end. I haven't been to a movie theater since 2020 for
you know,
obvious
I
reasons.
because I think a lot of it was like, can it build a mythos? Can there be Avatar lore that I can really sing it to? And yeah, there kind of is. I mean, shit. I don't like Star Wars. So, I mean, I've got to have something to talk about at parties, I guess. But I really like the second one. So yeah, I'm actually really interested in a game. And there's certain genres or games or worlds where I'm like, man, maybe this does make sense for Ubi to do it, right? And Pandora is one of those few times where I'm like, yeah, I'd love to just wander around an open world, climb my little dragon guy up into a tree, and it's really just a tower that sinks and all this other stuff. But I'd be interested in it. I'm
Yeah,
interested in where they. I'm saying this as someone who probably who may be the only person who finished Valhalla. And that game was hours and hours and hours of gameplay in a good way because I liked it. But I think if they get an area or an idea or a world that they can really sink their house style in, it can work.
yeah.
It just becomes such a formula at this point that we've grown tired of it. You
I,
know.
I think that's fair. The way I see it is if the formula applies well to that world, which I think it does to Pandora, then yeah,
Hmm.
I'm excited to do it. But if they're like pushing it into someplace where it doesn't belong, like when they
Right.
tried to Ubisoftify Watch Dogs, or when they put frickin' like control towers in the crew, like like that game did
Yeah.
not need that.
These
So
are all very fair points.
that's why I'm excited for that. I'm not an Assassin's Creed guy, so I'm not excited for Mirage, but folks might be. I
I
think the
think
concept is good, so
there's some of the things in the pitch of Mirage that aren't a bad idea on the surface. I mean, I'm still not gonna try it, but
like scaling
but
it
I
down, making
yeah,
it more
scaling it
focused
down,
on the
making
assassin
it kind
stuff.
of yeah throwbacky basically.
Yeah,
There's definitely an audience that will really be receptive to that.
I'm down for a throwback for sure.
Yeah,
Um, we're probably gonna see Skull and Bones in some capacity, right?
Oh,
we're gonna be seeing we're until that game launches, we're gonna
I
be
gotta
seeing Skull and Bones at every show now. Skull and Bones is the new fucking I don't know Far Cry 6.
I gotta go back to the prediction podcast and see what I predicted on Skull and Bones, but I have no clue at this point. It could come out tomorrow or it could come out 2 years from now, but I think the sign that people didn't play the open beta was not great.
There was an open beta for the game.
Yeah, they couldn't get
There was.
and like they were like people were playing like 8 minutes, 14 minutes, 7 minutes. Like they couldn't get people to stick with it long enough. It was like actually like there was like news reports or whatever like people hate this so much they're not even playing the open beta.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Looks like Skull and Bones is the Redfall of the sea. So.
Aw, Redfall doesn't deserve that.
All right.
Red, Redfall did only release to satisfy a foreign government.
That is true. So don't if you don't want to
Foreign means
release a
I'm not
game in
trying
the end, don't
to
get funding
stigmatize
from
Singapore.
Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to stigmatize Singapore at all, for the record.
I mean, it goes for I think any government that's going to
Yeah,
fund your game. If
yeah,
you don't want to
governments
release that game, don't get that funding.
yeah, don't commit to a nation being responsible for that money getting back to them.
Yeah, so about 38 studios. No, let's not go down that road. Speaking of corporations and their dealings with the government.
Elegant,
Sorry?
very elegant segue.
I was like midway through that segue when I figured out where I was going with that. I was like, wait, the government's involved. Oh, it works. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority recently blocked the Microsoft Activision deal, citing the potential of a monopoly in the cloud gaming market. Uh, Microsoft does intend to appeal. You should note that the appeal can only be based on procedural concerns, which there might be in this case. Some legal analysts have contended that definitional concerns about terms used might count as procedural concerns, so they might have grounds to appeal. But it's really hard to guess what happens next, whether it means the entire deal is
Ooh.
scuttled, whether it means Microsoft does something special in the UK to satisfy regulators, whether it means that the appeal could be successful. We don't know at this stage, and I don't
Yeah.
think anyone can really guess exactly what's
Yeah,
going to
no,
happen.
no one could truly be proclaimed to be like absolutely certain about this. Not when Microsoft is as stubborn as it is. Not when the governments have been as unpredictable about this as they have.
Because
Like,
I don't think any analyst had this on their bingo card.
I
no,
I
a lot
honestly,
of people were counting on this sailing through the UK at this
yeah,
point. Once they cleared them on the Call of Duty stuff.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean,
Word,
I'm not
word
like a
is sorry, Captain. Word is that the European Commission tomorrow, as of this recording, word is that they will give approval, but at the same time, like the UK is too big of a market to try to completely circumvent. I think. I mean, maybe they'll try. Christ, because
I
again, they're really adamant about this deal.
I just don't get what adding Activision does to create a monopoly in the cloud gaming market. I just don't get it. Like I don't know. I don't know if about these laws or things like
I
that.
think.
I
I
could have
mean, the
thought
cloud gaming market's too theoretical still for that to mean
right.
anything to me
Yeah.
personally, for
Right.
sure.
I will point out part of antitrust, like aggressive antitrust I can say words, antitrust doctrine. Part
Mhm.
of aggressive antitrust doctrine is applying a standard called incipient monopoly, which is the
Right.
idea that if we let this deal go through, then a monopoly will form in an emerging market, and we want to
Yeah.
prevent monopolies from forming in emergent markets. So maybe
Yes.
according to that standard, this is a market that could emerge and could become big. We have to
Mm.
prevent that monopoly from forming. Um, my and like I'm gonna kind of reach back into like we're gonna get a little technical here for a second.
Sure.
Um, where I think this is a little bit faulty in the case of the cloud gaming market is that I think it's actually targeting the wrong thing, and
Yes. Oh
I
my
think
God.
Kappa's intuition is correct here.
Mm.
Um, like in terms of monopoly power, Microsoft is going to be able to keep that monopoly power in the cloud gaming market, not because it's able to like purchase publishers and be vertically integrated on the like software side. Microsoft's advantage is in being vertically integrated on the hardware side, being
Hmm.
vertically integrated in terms of having their own cloud servers.
Right,
Hmm.
because there's only
Yeah.
really three people who even play in that world, right?
Yeah, and
Microsoft, Amazon, and Google.
one of them
And
left
yeah,
the market.
yeah, they said no,
Yeah.
this is not for us. And Amazon is barely holding on with Luna. I wouldn't be
Hmm.
surprised if Luna was shoved out the door tomorrow. And
And
it's basically
Hmm.
leaving just one company who wants to deal with apparently what is a gigantic money losing headache,
and
right?
Hmm.
guess what? Guess what? OS Luna's running on.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. But
Yeah.
also, if you consider this a deal to save Sony, well, guess what servers Sony's streaming their games on? You know,
Yep.
Yep.
it's
They use
And
Azure.
they
yeah,
also use
The
Azure.
only other
Yes.
company that really has their own servers is Nvidia, but GeForce Now is
Mhm.
pursuing a completely different business model,
Yeah.
which is not centered around securing exclusives. So the reason that that Microsoft has monopoly has more to do with its position as a cloud provider than
Hmm.
its catalog of games. And
Yes.
what you really have to be
Exactly.
worried about is not so much monopoly power, because people can get other leisure activities. What you really have to worry about is monopsony power, which is when Microsoft becomes a sole buyer of software in the cloud
Hmm.
gaming market, which means Microsoft has the ability then to turn around and offer raw deals to any like developer of games who needs to go sell on the cloud gaming market. And like the real problem isn't so much that Microsoft can go acquire Activision if you're worried about monopoly power. The problem is that it's vertically integrated on the hardware side. And it's kind of too late to solve this problem. You have to break up Xbox and Azure into separate companies to solve this problem.
Yeah, but who's exploring that fucking avenue?
I mean, I think it should happen. I don't
Yeah, I
think that
agree.
software providers and cloud services providers should be the same company. But
Yeah.
those horses have
That
already
ship.
left the barn. There's nothing we
yeah,
can
Exactly.
do
and,
now.
and I don't think
That's
you.
my. Sorry, Kappa. Go ahead.
I don't think. I think if the other two players were, small time mom and pop server companies, we might have a little more of an argument. But when Amazon and Google are both like, no, we don't want to play here, that was your competition. They left. And it wasn't because Microsoft forced them. It was because they just didn't see the money. And I think.
I
Go
think
ahead.
Google was a victim of its own terrible business model.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, Amazon I think is going to stick around for a while, but I think what Amazon's problem is that it doesn't have that it doesn't it doesn't have the ability to um like attract games in the same way to their platform. And so yeah, I do take the point that
Yeah. Like, what avenues are there for meaningful competition in cloud right now? Like, genuinely.
like problem with Amazon is if and like I guess the CMA's argument does kind of apply here in that, Microsoft has the ability to attract games a little better to their service just because it has exclusive to begin with. Amazon has just had a lot of trouble spinning up game development.
Hmm.
Like they've found it to be
Boy,
super
have they.
hard to the point that now, in order to attract game development, they're effectively just acting as a publisher. Um, and where I think things are a little bit strange with regard to Amazon is they're not making these things Luna exclusive. They're not trying to like pushing their own platform.
If
Uh,
anything, they probably would want a more robust Microsoft to partner with and put their games on Luna, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, as long as Microsoft didn't say that we're the streaming home of whatever, I mean, they probably don't care. I really don't think that Amazon would care
I think
how
they're
they're
too
doing
big a
it.
company to coordinate this stuff. Like otherwise you'd have seen Crucible tearing up the charts on Twitch.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
there might be
They,
antitrust concerns surrounding
they
that.
don't even remember they own Twitch half the time.
Yeah. Like for a company that's so vertically and horizontally integrated, Amazon takes very little advantage of that. And maybe that is so that they don't raise the ire of regulators.
Yeah.
Not that antitrust regulators, at least in Canada and the United States, do anything ever. But like, maybe that's why. Because otherwise, I can't think of a reason why Amazon doesn't take advantage of its integrations. I have no idea why. Um, so I'll just say I don't know the CMA is necessarily targeting the correct thing, but I also
Yeah.
think it targeting the correct thing would be an extremely long, excruciating, and potentially losing battle that
Yeah.
kind of chipping away at this in an ever so slight way is the best that the CMA can do, even if it doesn't really accomplish their goal.
Yeah.
Oh,
My
sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry. Briefly. So my take on this basically is, I mean, this isn't news that I oppose mergers on general principle. I but all but there's these other two things here. One, it really bothers me how faulty a lot of the CMA's chosen arguments are, both on general principle, and then but also most importantly, it concerns me. I have a genuine concern that they're leaving themselves vulnerable to getting the ruling overruled by making a lot of very faulty arguments that are vulnerable. But at the same time, there is still the question of well, the appeal process, the way it works, is going to make it hard for it to work out in Microsoft's favor. It just is. And even if they had accomplished that, like, yeah,
Yeah,
there's Microsoft has a lot of obstacles still in their way to making this work out for them, including like just, hey, how feasible is it to like treat the UK market like completely separately from the rest of the world? Um, these are serious obstacles for them, and I don't like that. I don't like that the CMA left themselves vulnerable to making this easier for them whatsoever, let alone that by having focused on really a lot of the wrong things. I hate that none of these fucking regulators, the FTC, the CMA, and the EC, no one's goddamn talking about mobile enough, I don't think.
Oh, no one
Why
is. Like,
why
no
is
one's
no one
talking about the
talking about
fact they're going
mobile
to
at
own
all?
King.
Yeah, why does no one care about King and the fact that they explicitly say they want to base a fucking their like the competition to the App Store and the Google Play Store on the basis of owning fucking King?
I think the issue there is it's a lot harder to argue that a monopoly would be forming. That would be a new entrant
Yeah.
into an extant market. Um, Whereas for the cloud, that is something where you can make an incipient monopoly argument.
Yeah.
As far as the appeals process, you're right, it is going to be an uphill battle
Mhm.
because it doesn't actually matter how faulty the logic is.
Right. Yeah, it's
The appeal
procedural.
is only on procedural grounds. And my
Yeah.
understanding is that procedural can include definitional problems in case
Yeah.
they've abused terminology or defined terms incorrectly or defined like market segments incorrectly, but it can't attack the analysis in any way. So even if they did the math wrong, that is something Microsoft cannot argue in the appeals process. Is my understanding. Might be mistaken about this. I'm not. Believe it or not, I am not an antitrust lawyer. So
Nope,
uh,
me neither.
this
I just
is
think that
the best of my understanding.
I used one UK source on my analysis of that stuff, and I mean, they were a helpful source, but
I don't think Microsoft's done buying though. I think if this doesn't go through, they're buying somebody else. You know,
so that
um,
maybe they'll just go smaller again.
I think Riot. I think they're going to buy Riot. I think they've got a little bit of a relationship going with them. All those games are now part of Game Pass. I think they've got that. Riot's got that cool feel. They're on that edge. You know, they got some problems inside. You know, Microsoft looks like they got a type. They want to fix them.
I
They
feel like they
like
could
bad
go for EA.
relationships. I think they're
I
gonna buy
feel like they
Riot.
could. I feel like they could go for EA, and I think they could
Yeah.
use a lot of existing arrangements to
Yep.
circumvent a lot of the same arguments that were used against Activision, to make it easier to get EA through regulators.
I could see them. I could see Ubi. Ubi's been
Yeah.
rumored to be looking for somebody for a long time. I mean, I don't think they're done. I think they thought Activision would be the easiest of those, to be honest with you, because nobody likes Kotick and they had huge problems over there. And I
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, what is the bar for like buying a studio? How big or small do they have to be for it to go through? I don't know, but
Yeah.
I feel like Activision is smaller than EA. They're smaller than Ubi, and they're smaller than. Well,
they're
they're probably not. That's probably
they're
it.
They're
larger
not.
than both of those
They're
Yeah,
larger
but
than both
because
of
of
those,
Call
yeah,
of Duty.
because
by
of
the relevant.
yeah,
Yeah.
by the money, I would
metrics.
say yes, but as in what they actually like put out year to year.
Oh,
You know
sure.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Activision barely puts out any games.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like they put out a Call of Duty and a Warcraft expansion every year. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
Now
So
in
money
Overwatch,
wise, yeah, but
every 6 months.
yeah,
Fewer, fewer employees than Ubisoft is my understanding. But
That's
yeah,
true. Yeah, but also that's why no one wants to buy Ubisoft.
yeah, they have to probably do like a global restructuring, and who wants to
Yeah.
deal with that?
That and the
Ubisoft has very famously tried to avoid layoffs and churn. Like that is the one thing that like there are stories that came out a few years ago about how between projects, if they didn't have any work for someone, they'd effectively just send them to an quote like an empty room for professional quote unquote professional development,
Mhm.
because they really did not want to churn their developers. Because they're like,
Yeah.
no, we're going to lose the talent who makes the games that make us the money. So if
That's kind of
someone doesn't
admirable.
have work for 3 weeks, whatever.
Sure, but it also backfires on you once a lot of your staff leaves you and you're having difficulty hiring anyone new.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. Which is
So
exactly their circumstance.
that's where Ubisoft is right now.
Yeah.
We are going to take a short break, and when we come
Sure.
back, Kappa is going to tell us all about GTA roleplaying. Welcome back to episode 91 of the Avocado Games cast. Bones had something to attend to, so now it's just me and the Kappa. And Kappa's going to tell us all about the latest update developments in the world of Grand Theft Auto role-playing.
Yeah.
What's going on at GTA RP, man?
Oh, a lot. So here's the thing about GTRP. Like, I never really grappled with how big GTA RP is. So just to give you an idea, role playing, right? You play a character on a server. It's not GTA Online, which is the world of heists and an online game and stuff like that. RP is a lot different. They're kind of highly modded servers, right? Where people can be anything from a cop to a bus driver to a criminal to a biker to EMS. It's trying to create an actual living, thriving world with economies and stuff like that, as people role play their place in that world, right? Now, if you were to go to Twitch right now, like I just did, for example, the new Zelda came out yesterday, 2 days ago, not long ago, right? It's the number one streaming game right now at like 126,000 viewers, right?
Yeah.
Number two is Grand Theft Auto at 117,000 people watching Grand Theft Auto. There is a reason, and it's GTA RP. Trust me, nobody's watching anybody play GTA Online, right? So Rockstar, I'm sure, still loves the fact that this game has the kind of legs it has because people are into GTA RP. Lots of big famous streamers have dipped their toes into this. I mean, your big streamers like your Summits, your Lyrics, your XQCs. So if you know these names and you know streamers, these are not like the little guys. These are the big guys.
I know two of those names.
Okay,
And I don't know anything about streamers, so that tells you that they must be big.
Exactly. They're the kind of names that make like the list. So kind of there's been lots of ups and downs in servers, right? And there's always drama, as any community is going to have, right? So for the past 3 or 4 years, there's been kind of these like servers that are up, servers that are down. Eventually, kind of the one true server seemed to arise called NoPixel, right? And this is the big GTA RP server for a while. This is where all the big names played. This is where you could meet and play an RP with the famous folk. So I'm going to caveat getting into this with a lot of this stuff is still developing. A lot of this stuff is weirdly like fluid. I bet half these people by the time that I get this edited are going to be outed or Me Too'd or named in a lawsuit, which I'll get into.
Oh, wow. This is getting spicy already.
Yeah, it gets spicy. So NoPixel kind of started to unravel, I would say, initially about 6 months ago. Now, there's an owner. I don't want to mention his name because he's like famously litigious, first of all, right? He's the owner of the server. He's kind of run it with his friends, and his friends are kind of in a gang. Now, you can imagine that a gang in roleplay kind of has a weird relationship with a lot of the server, right? Because you're basically either the cops trying to catch them or the victims they prey on, right? So there's a lot of rumors that because they're friends with the owner, they got away with a lot of stuff, right? Not a big deal just yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's role
However,
playing, right?
a lot of this started to go out of character instead of just in character stuff and be like there was like intense grooming allegations, or like, if you stream with me, I'll get you views. I can get you partnered on Twitch. I can get you things like that, right? As long as you do certain things. So that's where some of the initial allegations went, right? And lots of people came forward. Lots of brave women and men actually were like, hey, this sucks. This is what it's like to play on here. And, here's some of the names of the people doing it, right? So things started to get a little wild, right? A lot of allegations started to go back and forth. And then eventually there kind of was like a reckoning, and it was kind of like an, are you with us or are you against us? In came now the weirdest thing that's happening is a lot of the police forces going through what they call a restructure. Now, police force in an RP server are kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they're role-playing cops, but they're also kind of like almost like mini admins, right? They're enforcing the rules at the same time that they're also being a cop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in the game world, they have to do reports that are kind of like both admin reports and also like, in game, you stole my car, but also you called me something that I found very sexist. There's lots of misogyny, there's lots of sex, but it's still GTA world, but some of it isn't role play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, some of it's just like straight up like sexism.
Yes, exactly. Like, it doesn't all hit the same. Like, your character might say something, but there's the line that you cross, and there's a lot of consent, right, in role play. So this kind of spins out of control with the big streamer that, as far as I know, his name is Penta. He left. He was kind of done with his server. He's like, I'm done with it. I don't like to deal with it. There's more stuff behind the scenes than even you guys are seeing, right? So a lot of people thought, okay, bitter guy gets banned, gets kicked, takes his ball and runs home. Becomes part of a new server. It's called Ignite. The theme there is it's basically GTA but set in 1985. I'm just gonna go ahead and add my little personal spin. It's fucking cool. If you're into RP at all, Ignite is rad because it's like it's so based around the interactions with people, but also it's kind of funny because we're a little bit older and like these kids think 1985 is like 1955. Like they're like, did they have color TV? Did like
Yeah.
weird stuff. But so anyway, so a lot of people were like thinking that, hey, this whole thing that he dropped, this little bombshell, there's more to come, whatever, sour grapes, right? Nope, there wasn't. Gigantic lawsuit hit, I think, as of last week, where the actual guy who did most of the coding for the server, I believe his name's DW, right? He was considered an admin, but also a developer and a staff that kind of made a lot of the nuts and bolts behind the scenes getting this to work, right? Has sued for part ownership and a lot of money about how the server kind of ended up a success with him not being paid for a lot of it. It's a very interesting lawsuit to read. Like I said, famously litigious owners, going to push back against it. But he's been fighting back so far by basically streaming as he opens CSGO boxes, basically gambling, and just shit talking everyone involved. I'm sure his lawyers are having stress fits constantly
Just
because of it.
aneurysms.
Yeah, right. Like, hey, this guy's suing you for money. You're basically on stream shit talking people and gambling. Not a great look, right?
Absolutely not. No.
So it's kind of led to this big schism now in the RP community, and there's been a lot of like weird heartwarming stories that have come out and a lot of like devastating, like you have no idea how bad it is type things coming out as well. No Pixel has gone under basically a new owner. He's a very popular streamer on the server. I don't know that he's ever been like in an admin position. I'm not 100%. He's famously been permabanned on the server, but was coming back. So lots of weird things going on. But I know this seems like niche entertainment. It is, right? But when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of viewers and tens of thousands of Twitch subs and stuff like that, this is like the unraveling of like a TV network in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where people are all coming in and they're saying, hey, this is what I role play for. This is what I enjoy. And this is what it's become. So it's really interesting to see something that's basically has been Twitch's fallback meta. So Twitch, in Twitch terms, a meta is, hey, this is what everybody who's popular is doing. You laugh, you lose, react streams, drama streams, stuff like that, right? So over time, the meta has been lots of different things. The fallback for lots of big streamers and lots of people has always been Grand Theft Auto, right? There's always been the
popular.
right, yeah. There's always been the fallback. Hey, times get tight and we don't have anything. Let's fall back and do GTA RP. So to see this kind of cash cow just implode like this in real time with lots of shittiness, lots of pettiness, and lots of real world, money and legal things on the line it's been like the kind of like drama where like if you're on the inside, I'm sure it feels so much more real, but from the outside, it's just like how can adults who play a video game and play a fake cop let it get to this level, but at the same time you want this stuff to come to light, but it's just so weird that it has to do it this way. So seeing what's happening in that world, and I watch a fair amount. I'm not like super, there's people who watch way more of it than me. But just as a casual viewer who will, pop a couple streams on as I eat dinner, it's been sad, that like to see a lot of these people who have these relationships and get along or this or that, kind of have to pick a side. And the reason I really am so invested in this is there was something that Penta said, the streamer who was banned, who went on to the new server, right? He explained a lot of these people have their livelihood tied up into this server, right?
Yeah, because that's what their audience wants, and that's what
Yes,
they stream like every day.
and that's where their friends are, and that's where their character is, and that's where their storylines are. And what he's been kind of an interesting advocate in a lot of ways, because he said, one thing that really resonated with me, he said, the server didn't make you, you made the server. Don't feel like you're beholden to a bad place where you're uncomfortable, because that's where you became popular, because you became popular. Don't let them trick you into thinking that it was just a server and you just happened to be on it. And you don't really hear that a lot. This guy could be a bad guy for all I know too, but I don't. That kind of message, I think, is really, it's easy to say for him because he's a huge streamer with 10,000 subs, right? But it's the kind of like truth that I think that people in a lot of situations do need to hear. There is hope if you do walk away, and don't feel like you have no chance to to rebuild or make it your own. So I'm really interested to see where it goes. Over the next couple months, years, wherever. There definitely could be a scenario where, like, No Pixel bounces back under new ownership, people kind of forgive and forget, and the lawsuit goes nowhere. But I think we've kind of seen a shift in the GTA RP meta, where people aren't going to be willing to just put up with owners or people who run things in the wrong way just because that's what they're used to. So it's kind of where I am with GTA RP. It's kind of a downer of a story in some ways too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's only so much mistreatment that people are willing to put up with. And at a certain point, when you cross that threshold, yeah, people are going to like take notice and they're going to rebel, for lack of a
right.
better term.
Yeah, I agree. And it puts you, if this is your gig, if this is your livelihood, it puts you in a very tough spot, right? Obviously. So to the people who are caught, I'm sure this feels a lot worse or a lot, more stressful than the people on the outside who are just looking for, the juicy drama or the hot gossip or where this guy's going or stuff. But um, I don't know. Like I don't want to see like the Predators win in a way, So like I'm hoping that this new server, this new 1985 thing, it catches on. The vibes are really cool. It's fun to hang out there. And I think it's really goofy because I was much younger in 1985, but I do remember some of it. But it does make me laugh when it's like, wait, did cars have could cars go fast in 1985 or did they only go 60? Like stuff like that. But so yeah, GTRP. Like, so if you've ever wanted to check it out, there's definitely a lot of streamers that are out there, a lot of little ones, to kind of dip your toes in. I always say, whenever you're looking for a streamer in any category, look for those people who are at that like 150 200 level. Honestly, don't go right to the big ones, because sometimes you don't really get a full picture of what's going on. And then sometimes the small ones, it's bad to say, but sometimes you're small for a reason. Find those middle ground people who kind of know what they're doing and can and kind of give you that experience and still make you feel part of the chat.
Absolutely. Um, it's funny that you mentioned the 1985 server because like I wasn't born yet, um, but I always associate 1985 with that song by SR-71 that
Oh
Billy the
yeah,
Soup covered.
yeah.
Yeah,
It comes up a lot on that server. Trust me.
that
Like
like
there.
for so many kids that's their only relationship to 1985. That's the only way they can like conceive of that year. And then someone pointed out to me that this year um, is just as far back to when 1985 the song came out as the year the song came out was to
1985.
1985.
Ah!
So now we're all super
You
old.
come full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So there should be a song called 2004 that came out
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah. That make me feel even older. So.
All right. It's time to chat about what we've been playing lately. And I am going to mention or talk about a game that I finished a while back, but that because we haven't had a podcast in a little while, it's a game that I thought should be discussed. And that game is Atomic Heart. I when I first last talked about it on the podcast, I was only an hour and a half in or so. Uh, so now I finished the game,
Mm, okay.
and when I when I talk about video games, like I'm always trying to kind of distinguish between is this a bad game or is it just not for me?
See, that's why I was kind of interested that you finished it, because you know. Okay, go ahead. I'm not going to say anything.
So, like, okay, let me give an example of a really good game that wasn't for me. That'd be Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
I think that game, like, I do not vibe with that game, but I can see what other people love about it so much, and I fully understand what they love about it.
yeah. There's
And that,
so many games like that for me too. I know exactly what you mean. Every Dishonored, but yeah, I get exactly what you mean. It's cool. It's just not for me.
yeah, and like, I legitimately feel that way about this game. This is not me trying to like appease Nintendo fans. I legitimately feel that this is a great game that I will never vibe with.
Hmm.
Um, Atomic Heart for a while I thought was that kind of game. I
Yeah,
thought that it was the kind of game that just had a certain combat rhythm that I wasn't vibing with, that had a certain kind of structure to how its open world and its levels interacted that was just not something that I was really vibing with. Um, but by the time I reached the end of the game, I was pretty confident that this is not a good game.
yeah, I would
And
agree.
not in the sense that this is like an awful, disastrous 2 out of 10 kind of game. This is like a mediocre 5 out of 10 kind of
Mhm.
game. Like, there's value here. There are some parts of it that are really cool, some really awesome set pieces. It's just amazing art design and really good world design. Some really cool novel ideas in this game. But fundamentally, where it falls apart for me is that combat just does not feel good.
Yeah, yeah,
And to explain why it doesn't feel good, I think you kind of have to understand this is a game that is very much inspired by the original BioShock.
yep.
To the point, wait, have you finished the game or played the
No,
game, or
I didn't finish it. That's why I was surprised you did.
you didn't finish it?
Nope, did
Like
not finish it.
right towards the end, they like explicitly reference Rapture, the setting of the first BioShock game. So this is a game that is just like, this is a bunch of people in Russia who really wanted to make their own BioShock. And I'm gonna like attack some sacred cows right now.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Uh, I don't think you should look to BioShock for inspiration for how to make a shooter, because BioShock is not a good shooter.
Nope.
There are a lot of
Eh,
things that are good
yeah,
about the original BioShock. Like, it's really good at creating atmosphere, like this game is as well, really good at creating atmosphere. But I do not remember anything, like, I do not remember anything good about the original
you were
BioShock's
throwing bees
combat.
at people, lighting them on fire, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was very, yeah.
Like, the gunplay in that game does not feel good.
Nope.
It feels awful, in fact. And you have some cool powers that you can use in interesting ways, but for the most part, uh, firing guns in that game, encounter design, the general approach to combat in that game is not good.
Yeah,
And so it's especially not good by the standards of 2023. And so if you're going to implant that combat structure into a modern game, you have to update it, which to their credit, they kind of did, but they took that already pretty bad combat structure and made it even worse.
yeah. So there is something fundamentally. I think I know what you're getting at a little bit because I love Bioshock as a series. The combat to me, I could honestly give or take. But what always done it for me was that they really kind of pushed this. Hey, here's how you do combat. You throw a plasmid, you hit them with your wrench, and then they die. You know what I mean? Or like you freeze them, you burn them, you do whatever, and then it's like a 1-2 combat system. And neither thing felt really like satisfying, you know. And you could kind of just treat most things as a joke, but like the combat was never a highlight of Bioshock to me. And there's something about melee in first person that never works for me. I could you could probably find one time where maybe okay, yeah, this worked, but I'm racking my brain and there's not a lot of times where I ever feel like there's satisfying first person melee combat in a video game. It always feels like I'm waving a broom at a spider or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like especially if the hits don't connect, you're like, why
Yeah.
is this not connecting?
Yeah.
I'm standing right in front of the guy, and it's just because positioning matters so much, and it's really hard to get an intuition for exactly what the correct positioning is when you go and approach a combat encounter. Um, so this game does have a bit of that problem because for the first little bit, you're going to be relying on melee. But even when you get guns and get good guns. Uh, but one of the problems with encounter design is that you um, you're swarmed with enemies
Hmm.
every time you approach combat. Like, you're very rarely kind of going in strategically to a combat encounter, kind of picking enemies around one by one, manipulating the environment to deal with enemies. Um, you're not doing anything immersive simmy, right? But this game is
Yeah,
paced like an immersive sim.
yeah.
So you kind of want to mess around with the environment to like fool robots into attacking each other, or like, I don't know, electrocuting water that electrocutes the robots. Like, you think there might be these cool interactions with the world that allow you to f- deal with robots in more interesting ways than just like braining them or shooting them, but there aren't.
Yeah,
Instead, you're just like swarmed with 20, 30 robots all in one go. 2030 is, by the way, in some cases, not even an exaggeration. Um, so you're just swarmed with all these robots, and the only way to really deal with them without dying is just like, the like backward shuffle while you
yeah,
fire kind of thing.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
in
It's
like bad
slowly
first-person
backing away
shooters.
as I'm shooting you. Yeah, that's always been awful combat, no matter when or where. It's
Like,
just it never worked.
I think of shooters where you don't need to do that, and
Yeah,
there are two ways to get around like not having to do that. One, have enemy placement and enemy strategy be such that enemies don't swarm you. So
yeah,
think of like Halo, where you don't get you can have a lot of enemies on the screen, but enemies will take cover, they'll flank you, they'll run around you. You'll never have like, aside from the flood, you're never going to have like 20, 30 enemies all in one go. And even when you have the flood, like some will stay back, some will kind of swarm you. Um, you're rarely doing like the backward shuffle thing. That was in the first
right.
Halo, but after that they realized, hey, that's not so much fun. Halo 2, 3, etc. kind of fixed that. Or you could do a shooter where you have just a lot of health, and so retreating while you manage your health is not something you really need to do. So think of like a Half-Life, where
Yeah,
you can take so many bullets that it kind of makes sense to keep pressing forward. Um, in
well,
Atomic Heart, it's a little bit different in that you can have a lot of health because healing packs are really plentiful, but the problem is your health bar is not that large. So you'll lose a lot of health pretty fast, and it takes time to heal, so you can't risk it. So you're really only healing in lulls in encounters or between encounters. So you can't keep pressing forward. You're always kind
mhm.
of like retreating every time you get hit.
So, I because I'm thinking of two other games who solved that problem, and it's the new Doom and Warhammer Space Marine. And what they would do is, if the stuff gets close enough in and you can melee it or finish it or whatever, you get your health back, right? Or you get a combat boost or something like that. And those games did a great job of making combat feel so much more active, right? Like you want to dive in, you want to be the one in there, um, you know,
And
chainsawing and punching away.
they add that like risk reward component
Hmm.
when you get rewards for getting in close.
Right.
There's no meaningful like risk reward here. It's all risk to jump
Yeah.
in to the
Yeah.
fray, and it's not fun to jump into the fray because the other like fatal flaw with this combat is enemies knock you to the ground in first person, which is extremely disorienting and
Yeah.
really irritating. Like, it's never fun to get knocked over in a game, and sometimes it's necessary for pacing to lend consequence, to lend weight. But if you get knocked down like once or twice every combat encounter, it ceases to have meaning. Like,
Yeah. It's like when you get knocked unconscious between every mission in Far Cry 5,
yeah,
It's like, okay, well, I guess my guy doesn't, he's just going to do these two things, then he's going to get knocked out and I'm going to get some more story. Yeah, exactly.
it's like that, exactly like that, but on like a micro scale now,
Yeah.
right? It's just happening in every encounter, and there's like you can dodge to get out of the way of attacks. So if someone's coming head on and charging towards you, okay, fine, that's on you. You didn't get out of the way, but you can also get attacked from behind, from the side, and so sometimes you'll just get knocked over because some guy plowed into you from your peripheral vision, and you're like, how was I supposed to avoid that? Like, I don't mind that much getting knocked over if it were in my power to be able to avoid it. But if I can't avoid it, I'm just getting annoyed. Um,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the game's not going to let you do that. Yeah, this game is always going to make you. It's always going to reward you more for not taking damage by walking away because nothing's really. Yeah, I guess exactly what you mean. I'm thinking of that like plant level. You know what I'm talking about? That
Yeah.
one. Yeah, and like in that one, you have to play it like way far back, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, the exploding enemies will the ones that like scream and like they're kind of like rockets and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
come into you and explode and they knock you over when they explode because everything in this game knocks you over. Um, yeah, the only way to really deal with those is to attack them from afar because usually you would melee these guys because you're going to conserve ammo, but those guys you have to like snipe at with your pistol.
Yeah, exactly. And the pistol
And
feels so. Oh god, it feels so bad. Yeah,
yeah, I didn't like the pistol in this game. I was fine with the like assault rifle and the shotgun because
hmm
they feel like nice and weighty. There's like just the right amount of recoil. But the pistol felt like it wasn't accurate enough for what
yeah,
I was trying to do with it.
exactly.
Um, and like I know accuracy in shooters is a whole like can of worms, and things that we feel aren't accurate might actually be accurate. But I don't think they nailed the feel of the pistol.
Yep.
Like to me it's not awful, but it's ever so slightly off in a way that made it something that I didn't enjoy using, and I always just like fell back to the shotgun and the assault rifle because I felt they're so much more reliable.
That would be a really interesting kind of like study, like pistols in video games, right? Like it needs to feel right, or you feel like you're limited. You're not having fun, you know. And lots of games fix that problem. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. This game, the pistol felt awful.
Yeah, I would say exactly that some of these weapons just didn't feel fun to use, whether the weight was off, whether they were hard to aim. I don't
Yeah,
know exactly what they were doing with like mouse acceleration or stuff behind the scenes. I didn't look deeply into my mouse settings, just kind of accepted the defaults and rolled with it. But something about aiming that thing did not feel right. Um, what the other thing I'll say is you mentioned like you kind of want to avoid combat. The interesting thing is that this game often lets you avoid combat.
yeah,
Like out in the
yeah,
open world sections, you don't have to fight anything. In fact, you're better off just running past everything
yeah.
because
And it
there's
feels
no point.
goofy. It feels goofy to do it when well, you got that old ludonarrative dissonance going on. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
this
your
guy is
wife.
just like, I'm ready to fight everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, never mind. I'm just gonna move quickly past all this stuff instead. Yeah, exactly. It's very goofy, the way it's kind of set up to be this tough, uncompromising badass who constantly is like, nah, I'm not gonna shoot that thing because I don't want to deal with all the other stuff that comes with it. You know? Yeah, I get exactly what you mean.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is like I think the fundamental problem is the respawning enemies. If the
hmm
enemies didn't respawn until you like left the open world and then came back to it, it would be a different story.
It's such an ancient like game mechanic. You know what I mean? Like I think about games that want you to explore then punish you for exploring. Like why the fuck do games do that? It's infuriating, right?
It's why I
Um,
didn't explore. I didn't do any side content in this
yeah,
game
exactly.
because I was just like, I don't want to explore.
Yeah,
Exploration is way too punishing. It's not fun. And it's a bummer because these, like, the levels and the general world design, how they've recreated this, like, valley region in Russia is so well realized. And to not be able to explore it because exploring it is just so infuriating is such a shame and such a
it's
waste
weird.
of resources.
There's a lot of games that do that. Just Alan Wake is a good one, right? Like they want you to go find these pages, right? These lost stories from Alan Wake, right? But God, why would you ever leave the path, you know? Or like Dead Rising, all the zombies are all back, and you got to go deal with all that crap, you know? Like every single time, it's just, what are we doing here? You know, like it's yeah, I hate games that punish you for exploring after you've already cleared an area, already done what you're supposed to do or whatever. It's a very bad mechanic. It needs to, I get the point of respawning enemies so that you're not just, but all you're really doing is wasting my time. If it's something that I'm not going to get anything I need or there's no point to it, I'm not grinding, I'm not getting some type of, you know, material or crafting or gold or money or whatever. No, just let me explore.
Yeah, you do get materials, but the rewards are not that great.
No, yeah, I don't
Honestly,
think
you
so.
don't need them, especially like I played on easy because I just didn't want to bother. I heard that medium was really hard, but unfortunately, easy was a little too easy. They didn't
Yeah,
tune it properly. If there
uh,
was like a difficulty level between easy and medium, it probably would have been perfect. Uh,
medium. Yeah,
like
yeah, no.
medium, yeah, medium would have been great. Uh,
I get what you mean. I've been loving how so many games lately have been letting you adjust difficulty in like very small gradients in particular ways, right? Hey, I want the combat to be hard, but I want the
like the
the
traversal to be
stealth
easy.
mechanics easier. Yeah, yeah, that's what I like, man. There's no reason not to do that now.
Yeah, especially especially for a game like this where if I could tune the combat ever so slightly to be a little more meaningful, but not
Mm,
as brutally hard as some reviewers reported it to be, then that probably would have been ideal for me.
yeah.
Uh, the other thing I'll point out about like the way this is structured in the open world, I think the intention is to have you drive around in vehicles to avoid some combat. But the funny thing about the vehicles is that they're so fragile that if you crash into anything once, they just explode. And they're really hard to drive as well. So every time I got into a vehicle, I lasted about 10 seconds. I ran into something, it exploded. There's no other vehicle around. Oh, well, I guess I'm hoofing it to my next
Yeah,
location.
yeah.
And this happened like multiple times. So I didn't really get to take advantage of some of the mechanics in this game because the game made it so hard to engage with them.
Yeah.
Um,
And even if you wanted to explore, the risk versus reward is just not there to do it. So you just kind of say, okay, well, I'm just going to beeline this game. And that makes it more of a 5 out of 10 if you think about it. It's just, hey,
yeah,
you didn't want me to engage with it, so I didn't. I'm not going to fight you. Yeah.
like I think about this game even with the like terrible story and voice acting, and if it had just tuned the combat better, I'd have been like, yeah, that was a pretty good time. Um,
A lot of streamers kind of had the same reaction I think that you did. And my playthrough was just I didn't get all the way through it. I was just kind of like, all right, I get what you're doing, and I the
did you
combat
make it
being bad.
past the plant level?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
I'm trying to think, where did you get up to? Did you? Um,
It was like a big machine thing. I don't know. It was kind of long. It feels like a long time ago now, but just like I
I
think
think
in
you were like
general.
right near the end, actually.
Really?
I think you're like 2 hours from the end.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, that's a short game then, because yeah.
It's about.
But
It took me about 15 hours to clear.
okay, okay, yeah. Then I probably gave it about a good 10 if I had to guess. So,
Yeah, you're better at games than me, so you're probably like 2 or 3 hours away from the end.
um, but overall, it's not a good game, not a bad game, not a memorable game. That's the main thing. I didn't have a problem walking away from it, honestly, and not completing it. Just didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I will say the last part of the game has some really fantastic art direction, but in terms of combat, you're not missing that much. It
Yeah,
doesn't have much in the way of really cool set pieces.
that's kind of what I figured. And it sucks, but like I think we've talked about this before. I've gotten to the point where I can get to in games where I can comfortably say, all right, I got it. You know, I don't need to put the check mark in the completion category. I've got it. I'm not enjoying it. I got enough to play or move on to. I don't feel like I have to. So I was just more surprised you finished it. I don't know why. I mean, I know you do enjoy those types of games, but it just felt like at some point you're kind of struggling with it more than enjoying it. I thought, but maybe that was more me.
I'm someone who likes to finish games,
Mm,
and it's very rare that I don't. Um, like the only reason I might not complete some games I started a couple of months ago is because I took a break from gaming because of COVID.
yeah,
Um,
because you
it's hard.
got COVID.
Yeah, because I got
Yeah,
COVID,
it was
not
like,
because
oh no.
COVID still continued to exist. I played a lot of games during
Yeah,
lockdown when it first happened.
yeah, me too.
Um, yeah, so I had a pretty bad case of COVID as well. Like, was literally bedridden for a couple of days. So I, uh, I couldn't like play games at all for a
Yeah, you,
little bit.
you just couldn't do it. Yeah.
I physically couldn't play video games, and so what I began doing for while I was laid up with COVID was I just started like I subscribed to Dropout and I started getting into um, like actual play uh, tabletop because I was watching Dimension 20.
Mhm.
So that's kind of been my thing now. I'm like a vicarious tabletopper more than I'm a gamer these past few weeks. Um, the other game that I did finish though, that I wanted to discuss briefly is a visual novel called Misericorde, um, which is it's actually I thought it would be more obscure than it ended up being. It's actually gotten some write-ups from some gaming outlets at this point, but at the time I played it, it hadn't yet spread that much by word of mouth. Uh, a friend of mine on Discord recommended it to me. He's like, "You're into narrative BS. You're a hip gaming hipster. You'll dig this." And I was like, "Yeah, you know exactly what kind of filthy animal I am. Uh,
Gotcha.
you
Yeah.
got me." And then I was kind of mad when it turned out to be excellent because I'm like, am I really that easy to read? But yeah, it is excellent. It is a fantastic visual novel. And this is like straight up visual novel. You don't make any
Yeah.
choices throughout
Visual
this game.
novels are hard to nail. They are
Yeah.
very hard. So if one's able to do that, that's a genre. If you get it right, you should be patting yourself on the back because so many visual novels like you've got a cool story but you forget to do anything with it, you know? So yeah, that's very high praise for in my opinion to like recommend a visual novel.
Oh yeah, like great story, great prose, and the way they integrate it. It's not so much the interactivity that's meaningful here.
Mm,
It's the way it's integrated with sound and music and art that creates something really memorable. So to
yeah,
explain the
that's cool.
premise of this, it's a story about a murder in an abbey. You've experienced these
Oh,
kinds of
wait a
stories
minute.
before. Like you've played
Well,
Pentiment, you've read The Name of the Rose. Um, you know kind of what's going on here. So in that regard, it's within a well-worn tradition of a
okay.
murder taking place at a place of piety that turns out to be a den of iniquity. Like this is well-trodden territory, but the particular perspective this game takes is really interesting. Uh, Instead of playing the role of an outsider, you play the role of the most inside of insiders.
Uh-oh.
You play the role of an anchoress, and what an anchoress, the role an anchoress used to play in abbeys was they would lock themselves in a cell and would have no outside contact and devote themselves to the study of theology. So when the murder happens, because this woman was locked in a cell, she physically could not have committed the crime. Completely
Okay.
impossible. So she is the only person who can investigate it. And keep in mind, this woman has been locked in this cell since she was a child, like a tween. And like, being locked from like 11, 12 onward and now into her 30s. Um, so she has not like glimpsed the outside world in a couple of decades. She does not know anything that goes on in the Abbey. She doesn't even know the names of her fellow sisters. And so, yes, she is an outsider in the sense that she's learning all about this Abbey, but she's very much a part of the Abbey. Like she would have interactions through her door. Like she'd be sent meals, she'd have conversations with other sisters without knowing their names um, through her door. So in that sense, she's very much a part of the Abbey's life, and now her role has changed completely, and she's learning about the Abbey in the process.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's actually super well told in that regard. And what's really notable about this is the art style here. Like, those like harsh old school PC backgrounds that were like dithered and black and white.
Okay,
That's what's
yeah.
got going on here. It's like it's kind of like Obra Dinn, like Return to the
Okay.
Obra Dinn, except for flip the black and the white. So it's a
Uh-huh.
lot darker than
Yeah.
Obra Dinn, but same kind of thing going on there. Um, and it's layered on top. You've got these anime-inspired character models, which you think would really clash, but actually works really well. Um, and the other thing that's really notable, soundtrack is dope. One of
Okay.
the best game soundtracks of the year so far. Um, so what they do here is, excuse me, um, it's mostly like electro jazz. but what they're borrowing into it are like little glimpses of medieval music. So you'll get like an organ line kind of underneath some like synths and on top of like a modern beat. Um, and occasionally they'll borrow like medieval harmony. And if you ever heard medieval harmony, you kind of know exactly what it sounds like. For music theory nerds, medieval harmony uses a lot of like parallel fifths and parallel octaves. Um, so that gives like a really clean, almost religious sound to the music. So you have these lines that are going in like these like parallel fifths and octaves, but then on top of that you also have that jazz tonality, and jazz uses like a lot of chromatics, a lot of like non you could call it non-standard tonality, and like this is really neat symbolism in combining those two different kinds of tonalities together. It really kind of reflects the underlying like mixture of piety and sin that colors the whole game. So really neat stuff. Developed, I believe, mostly solo by dev main ZC.
Mm.
So go support them. Go support trans devs. Support trans devs who make VNs with banging soundtracks, which is a larger category than you might think it is. So,
I mean, it's just surprising. Like I said, like I think that's really cool when you can make a visual novel, you know, worth remembering. That's really cool. It's so hard to do. Um,
yeah, because like
so
for every good VN that I talk about on here, there's probably another bad VN I've played that I am not going to talk about on here because it's not worth it.
yeah,
So this is definitely worth your time if you're into this kind of game at all. Um, my understanding is that you've been playing something that is not a VN. You've been playing Lord of the Rings Online. Is that
yeah,
correct?
absolutely. I've been playing the shit out of it. I think it's hard to like put into perspective like old MMOs that have kind of run their course, right? They are fully put out to pasture, but the devs or whoever care enough to keep the servers up and running, right? Um, there's a million of them out there, and for every one of these, there's 10 more who've just kind of lived their lives out in the way that they did. But one of the things that I think was really interesting about Lord of the Rings from the get go, honestly, as a as a as an MMO, is they did a lot of instancing. And back before instancing was the thing that every MMO did, right? So, and in this case, what they do is they use the instances to tell specific stories from the Lord of the Rings world through the eyes of certain characters, right? So now that I've more or less beat the game, like I've gotten to the highest level that you can and all that stuff, what I'm kind of doing now is they're telling a lot of these stories like the fall of Mordor, or the Second Age battle for Mordor, or the War of the Three Peaks, stories like that, from different perspectives. And it's like we were talking about a little bit, that Lord of the Rings world is always so much deeper than even I know, right? And so they made a lot of these stories, and as from what I've understood and what I've read, they hew very closely to a lot of the actual, like, this is what Tolkien said he would have done, or this is from this letter, or from this, like, because he wrote about a lot of stuff about what he intended to do, but maybe never actually did, right?
Yeah, I didn't have the
So
time or resources to
right,
implement that stuff.
and there was one really famous quote of his that when I was reading about a lot of this, I really liked, where he basically said, like, like somebody asked him about, like, when did you start writing this? And he's like, I've always been writing this. He's like, this is like, I always think about this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, like, I can't put it all down pen to paper. I just don't have enough time in the day. Every time my brain is like, oh, this is what's going to happen with this guy or this elf or this whatever. So, in a really cool way, I feel like this game plugs a lot of those gaps. Um, this led me to rewatching War of the Ring, or I'm sorry, Rings of Power, which I think everybody can kind of admit was a slow burn. Like maybe it gets there, maybe it doesn't, right?
You
But
could
not a
say it
very,
weren't great, man.
yeah, not a very well received series. Who knows where it goes, right? But I think it's safe to say, like, it didn't deliver on what people wanted. But this game kind of does a very similar thing, but what it does that makes the story stick a lot more than what I think Rings of Power did. Rings of Power is trying to tell the story with characters that you kind of know, right? Or this is kind of Gandalf. This is what Galadriel was, stuff like that. Elrond before he was Elrond, stuff like that. But what this game does instead is it puts your character literally in the shoes of King Thorin, at this battle, and you're playing it, and you have his abilities and it's a lot cooler. And then there will be a lot of times where your character will relive a memory, and you'll be standing side by side with at the battle of five armies and stuff. And the only reason I really want to talk about this because I'm wrapping it up, but like it's a cool way to tell a story. And there's a lot of people I think who are really into Lord of the Rings, and other stories that I think would benefit from a different type of storytelling. But so many games I think want to tell a new story or unique story or a licensed story or things like that. But getting this delivered in the way it has been really fun, to kind of like. I think there's like a promise that's never been delivered by a lot of games. I think about like Assassin's Creed when they have like the walk through the lives of ancient Egypt or whatever, but what would it really be like to relive certain events or things from stuff you already know? And it's cool. It's a cool way to deliver it, and no MMO's really done that to my knowledge, right? Because you're usually experiencing the World of Warcraft story as it goes. They're not trying to live up to something. I think they messed around a little bit with the Bronze Dragonflight, but well after things, and then they had a retcon them and stuff like that. But um, I think it's a really cool way to deliver stories, in the footsteps of people who were there. So real interesting way to close out an MMO if you think about it, right? Because usually it's all about
Yeah.
celebrating you, the character, right? You're the God Slayer, you're this, you're that, and it does some of that, right? But no, now you're going back and seeing like, wow, this is what Thorin had to do, or this is what Gandalf said, or this is, where Aragorn figured out what he was, So, um, getting to the end of the line with this, maybe I'll make another character. I don't know. MMOs have that pull sometimes, but getting ready to put it away. And I just wanted to say, the devs had a cool idea, and sticking to it and telling a story takes a lot of guts in an MMO, because how many times have you played an MMO or RPG where you're the main character, you're the hero, you're this, you're that? But that's not what Lord of the Rings is, right? Everybody has their moments. So getting to go actually live those moments, I think, is a smart idea. So good job on that. Ready to put a bow around this one. Probably get back to Destiny, but good job, Lord of the Rings Online, for keeping it alive and keeping it kind of cool all the way to the end.
Yeah, it's so neat to have. I mean, A, that stayed up for so long,
Mm-hmm.
but to have this like kind of storytelling that centers history
Yeah,
more than it
that's yeah,
like centers um like I think there's a tendency, especially um like in video game kind of storytelling, even when it's historical, to kind of emphasize, like to almost push like a great man theory of history
yeah, yeah.
more so than like,
These
here is
people
what a battle
combined,
looked like.
yeah,
Here
yeah,
was a people. Even like Assassin's Creed kind of falls victim to it. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just like there should be more than one perspective when it
yeah.
comes to storytelling.
It
Um,
always felt a little goofy in a way in MMOs where like there's 10 million chosen ones running around. You know what I mean? Like, oh
yeah,
hey, we also killed the same god you did, so we're also the one who got that same cutscene. So, um, it's smart to give you a little bit of that because of course you want to make the player feel like they're invested and not just like because some of the worst Lord of the Rings stuff is when they basically do that, like, well, you and not Legolas and not Legolas and not Gimli and not Aragorn need to go do this mission, but like this one avoids a lot of that and says, yeah, hey, your character did a lot of cool stuff, but it was still, you know, it was still these people from the movies and the books that actually did it. You were there, and you were, but you weren't Forrest Gump in it. You weren't the reason they won. You were just a part of a battle. I think that's a really cool way to do it.
yeah, I think it like works on both levels. That it shows that yeah, you individually weren't the linchpin here, but also those like great people whom we've told stories about previously, they relied on people like you
Yeah,
to
exactly.
like
Like,
make things happen.
hey,
It
yeah, like
works on,
Gandalf says, hey,
yeah, both ways.
you character, you go over there and hold this bridge while they do this or do that, and like you're a part of it, but like it's not. Gandalf being like, "Thanks to you, the Middle Earth is saved. You actually were the one who threw the ring in," or something like that. So, um, good way to wrap up an MMO. And I think part of it I got burnt out on so many MMOs so quick, but this one I was able to keep up with mostly because I was so into the story and the lore, and they really did give a shit about telling you Lord of the Rings stories in a cool way. So smart way to keep probably what's a pretty small, I would imagine, user base engaged is by doing that. And I actually found this. I don't know. This is kind of when I talk about this. There's a guy who teaches a PhD in Tolkien studies, and
Ooh.
he actually does it partially through playing Lord of the Rings online. And I think he's on Twitch. I think the name is like Signum U. I think it's like Signum University. You can probably get in the link dump or something, but he has like a podcast, but he'll also basically do like coordinated like groups in Lord of the Rings. And as you go through areas, he'll tell you the lore and he'll tell you the background and like what Tolkien said about this or what he said about that as you go through it. And that is some next level shit. You can't do that with many other games.
That is
So
super neat.
when I first started watching him, I was like, wow, this is really cool because he'll do like a random dungeon and be like, okay, so this is these wargs were from this particular area and they were breeding them because and you're like, wow, holy shit, this is actually like some grounded cool stuff. So check that guy out. But that's the real reason I want to talk about the end of this because I really enjoyed what he does, which is tying it all into a literary type teaching standpoint. And, that was really cool.
Yeah, because that is like one of the things about Lord of the Rings is that it's become this literary classic. It
Hmm.
has become part of like the English literary canon, if you will. Um, so analyzing it through that lens, and then kind of analyzing how it's got its own mythos that is spread through multimedia, is something I think is really valuable.
Yeah.
So there's one more game that I wanted to talk about in our remaining time, and that is Lost Judgment, which I haven't finished because of the graphics card woes that we discussed earlier on the
Hmm.
podcast. Had to put that game on hold. But while I was playing it, I was having a really good time with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a convert to the Yakuza series, so I'm trying to wrap my head around this one. Is this one a reboot? Is this one a spin-off? What is this one?
So it's the sequel to a spin-off.
Okay.
Um,
In classic Yakuza tradition, yeah.
yeah, so a few years ago, RGG Studio spun off their main series with a game that was like the main series in that it had brawler combat, but instead of starring a guy who was linked to the Yakuza, it starred a guy who was a private investigator. And you basically did all the same Yakuza things. Combat functioned more or less the same. There are some stealth and puzzle and detective elements thrown in, um, and some traversal elements that weren't there previously. So this game is a sequel to that. It's called Lost Judgment, and it has a lot of the same mechanics as the first Judgment game, but it's kind of streamlined a lot of the investigative stuff that was annoying or poorly implemented previously, um, and made investigations a little bit more involved so that you're actually doing a little bit more sleuthing than you were previously.
Okay.
Um, but and it's also gotten rid of annoying gameplay stuff that the first Judgment have. The first Judgment had an injury system that if you got a serious injury, then the max on your health bar would go down, and you have to like run to a doctor to get that fixed. It was really irritating and not at all like a fun part of the game. Um, Other than that, though, it's very much the same as the first Judgment. They've added like a new fighting style in there um, that's centered
How,
around
so
like disarming enemies or using their power against them. But
what
that's
are we
about it.
talking about as far as like detective mechanics? How's it working?
So it's a mixture of kind of like visual novel, select the right choice segments,
Okay.
a lot of hidden object type stuff, which is
I think that's
Not
okay.
that well implemented.
Yeah, but I don't mind that for a detective game. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to make detective stuff feel fun in a video game because it comes down to like pixel hunting,
Yeah.
or like, like remember Batman when they had the detective mode? That was a thing, and I was like, okay, come on, you know what I mean? Like, hit the button and it just highlights things you need to go walk over to. That's not very detective-y, but that is a hard thing to do. So sometimes I wonder how how do you make detective fun and not silly, and something that you want to keep doing, especially if the game keeps making you do it.
Yeah, like there is a hint system that I've never used because I'm stubborn and I don't know what the hint system is like, whether it's like detective mode or whether it just like gives you a very strong hint about where to look next.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, essentially you're kind of like doing hidden object scanning kind of stuff for a lot of it. Um, Sometimes you'll have to examine evidence and um, like search it for clues or hints. So you do some actual detecting in this game, but for the most part, the detective work kind of takes place through the narrative. You're not the
Oh, that's
one
cool.
doing the detective work
Yeah, you
itself.
unravel it. Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. As a mechanic, detective stuff as a mechanic is tough. You either can make it really fun, or it's just kind of like, okay, I know what the answer, but where do I find the right thing to click on or whatever?
yeah, there's a lot of that, unfortunately, in this game
Mhm.
where you're like, okay, where do I click to advance the story? Um, that being said, so this is like I said, it's got brawler combat, unlike the new Like a Dragon games, which now going forward will have turn-based combat, and it's going to be the side games that have brawler combat. Uh, but with the excuse me,
Okay.
um, the thing that I did want to mention about this game uh, is like in addition to it being on the same maps as Yakuza 7, just instead of just brawler combat instead of turn-based combat. What's really interesting about this game is the story it's telling. Um, and I don't want to make too strong a statement on this game story because I haven't finished the game yet,
Hmm.
but it's a very different story than first the mainline Yakuza or Like a Dragon games, and also a lot different than the first Judgment game. So, like, you've played a few Yakuza games at this point,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I'm
And like
3 now. Yeah.
the stories in those games are like they tend to be like melodramatic and over the
Yeah.
top. Um, but what's they all have in common is that they're all anchored by the protagonist Kazuma Kiryu having a very strong sense of morality,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like he has a very strong sense of right or wrong, and like most of the time that's going to match up with like your sense of right or wrong or my sense of right or wrong. Sometimes it doesn't, but what is consistent throughout the games is that sense of morality.
Yeah.
Like that never wavers. Um, and it takes place in a world where it's fairly easy to reach moral judgments, like what this person is doing is right, what this person is doing is wrong. Um, and it's very clear that what the game thinks is right or wrong is also what Kiryu thinks is right or wrong. Um, Lost Judgment is a lot different in town.
Yeah.
Like this is a game and a story where that is very morally gray in a way that no other RGG studio game is.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a bad idea. I don't mind studios trying something a little different with tone or plot. Where this gets a little bit uncomfortable is that the game doesn't seem to know whether it's morally gray or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's kind of tough.
Like it doesn't seem to have a point of view on this, and I don't know whether I'm supposed to take the protagonist's morality as the game's view on morality or whether it's just that character's opinion.
Yeah.
It creates this really weird dynamic where I don't know how to interpret what I'm playing and I don't know what the game is trying to say.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Like, that's one of the reasons why any type of police games are always a little bit like, ooh, like, are we gonna frame this bad guy? Like, we're still not doing a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's yeah, detecting and all that kind of stuff is a little bit rougher than a yakuza who has a moral code. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is like a central problem here, that um, this guy does not operate according to like the same moral code that Kiryu might,
Right,
right?
right. Like, yeah, he might not have, like, he's a yakuza. He might not have a problem breaking a bad guy's hands, but he wouldn't do it to a school kid. Like, he's got his own code, and it's, this is what I do. But I'm still a bad guy. But I'm a bad guy with a code. Bad guys with a code are classic, literary figures, basically. So we all
Yeah,
kind of can relate with them. But when you put that on top of a cop, it gets, even the Shield. You're not supposed to be rooting for him. You know what I mean?
yeah, like you're
If
not.
the game seems like they are sometimes, that's when it gets rough.
Yeah, and I would say that what the protagonist in this case is like a PI, so not exactly a cop.
Okay.
Um, like what he's doing in this case, it's not necessarily he's doing like morally compromised things. It's that he doesn't really have um, like the judgments he reaches about morality are very black and white
Yeah.
compared to what's going on.
Does the
And
game even really need that, you think, though? I mean, like,
for the
you
story
know,
it wants to tell, it really needs to be a morally gray
okay.
story. Uh, because the story it's telling is, without spoiling anything, it's very much about revenge and the limits it should have. Especially when the people upon whom revenge is exacted are themselves really like bad people.
Okay.
So it's a little bit about that like tension that surrounds vigilantism. Um, but like it's about vigilantism against people who operated with impunity and
Hmm.
operated with visible and known impunity. It's not like
Okay.
someone retaliating against something that happened in the shadows. It's, I mean, okay, I'll say that it's about people who retaliate against bullies, and
Okay.
like high school bullying is a huge issue in Japan, and so
Right.
it's a very topical game in that regard. Um, but what this game posits is that there are certain forms of retaliation that might not be so great. For
Oh, yeah.
instance, murder. And I think
I saw
most
Old Boy.
people would agree that murder is not a great way to retaliate against
Yeah.
someone. Uh, and like, I don't want this. Like, this is not a game that says you should like bullies should operate with impunity, or maybe the victims are just as bad as the bullies. Like, this is not what that game is saying.
Yeah.
Don't like let's not attribute sin to this game that it's not guilty of committing. Um, but the way it sets up that particular revenge and the web that forms around it, like it requires you to acknowledge the moral complexity of what's happening.
Okay. I got
And
it. So,
the
like,
protagonist is like incapable of acknowledging that moral complexity. And what I'm really unclear on is whether that's the game's point of view, like the protagonist's point of view is the game's point of view, or whether the game is going to tell me, yeah, the protagonist is incapable of
does
dealing with
does that
this.
get murkier when you're considering that the primary audience for that is probably, school age Japanese men, I'm assuming?
I
You know
would
what I
say
mean? Like,
the primary audience for this game is probably like Japanese men in their like in their late 20s.
yeah, but like, who still like think about like the bully from high school, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, does that kind of
Like,
mess
I'll have to
with?
finish the game to be able to
Okay.
answer that question, because I don't think I'm going to get an answer on what this game is trying to say until the very end. And it might end up like the first Judgment game, which didn't really have much to say, but also wasn't trying to say very much. And
Okay.
this is clearly a game that's trying to say something and is, I mean, if it's not trying to say something, then it's grossly irresponsible. And if it is trying to say something, it might just be bad at saying it,
Ooh,
or it might be
yeah.
very good at saying it. I don't know. We'll see at the end. Um, but I will figure that all out once I get a new graphics card, which is not going to be for a while. So
To
I'm
be continued.
to be continued. Like I've kind of lost the plot. I need to like refresh myself on the plot when I get back into it because it'll have been like 3 or 4 weeks.
I would love to take a survey, mostly just like of the avocado, but like anywhere. But like, what's like the timeline for a game where you're like, shit, I gotta start over for you? Like an RPG or like something like the story is very crucial. Like if you stepped away from a game for 6 months, would you pick up where you left off and try to remember, or would you just be like, fuck it, I gotta make a new game?
It really depends. I've picked up games after months-long hiatuses before and just like plowed through.
But
Uh,
like a 2 year, like let's say you didn't like, what would be like your number where you're like, okay, yeah, now I gotta start over.
I did a 2-year gap with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I
Oh,
played
okay.
that. I started that game, I believe, in 2013 and finished it in 2018. And it
Okay.
was all just one playthrough across multiple computers.
See, I mean, for me, I probably can't go more like a year would probably be like I gotta start over. I can't. I don't remember enough of the details, who's who, stuff like that. Like I kind of like I don't file away a game's information as I go. I kind of like chunk it up, you know.
Yeah,
So
I'm like that
I
as well. I'm just
yeah
stubborn when it comes to
yeah.
starting over. I should probably adopt your strategy.
I'm just curious. I'm like, I don't know if I'm the weird one or like if that's what most people do or what. I just don't have a good feel on that.
No,
But
you're the
like,
sane one here, for
okay.
sure.
Well, for me, it was the worst one was Final Fantasy X. I think I put that down for about 4 months, and I came back to it. I literally could not remember a fucking thing about that game. I was like, wait, who's the bad guys? Who's the good guys? What is this guy? Like every time someone's name would come up, I had to Google it. I'm like, I just should start over. This shit is too crazy. So, yeah. There's definitely a lot of that going on in my own brain where I can't remember what the fuck I was doing. So I end up just being like, all right, I got to start over. So,
Yeah, I think I might actually be getting to that point with there are two games I've got going on my Switch right now.
hmm
Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope and Metroid Prime Remastered. And I've taken by now like a 5 month, not 5 month, 5 week hiatus from both of those games. Like every night before I like go to sleep, I'm like, should I play my Switch in bed or should I just like
oh yeah,
watch something on my laptop? And watch something on my laptop has just won out for the past 2 weeks.
yeah. Because like your brain is probably like doing the same thing mine does, where it's like, well, if I don't remember it now, it's like it's not gonna come back to me. And then yeah, like you can kind of push it away. It's weird, right?
Like I did that with Gravity Rush. It was I think the first or second game I played on my PS4,
Yeah.
and then I left it off because I had other games to play, fully intending to come back to it. And I have not touched that game since the year I got my PS4.
It's interesting because I think a lot of game devs and stuff for various reasons right now are kind of really holding on to FOMO to keep people like around. But I'm just as likely to be like, well, shit, I screwed up. I missed too much of this game. I'm done with it. You know, if it's like an ongoing live service season pass type game,
Oh
I've walked
yeah,
away from games because like that 4 month gap was just, well, you know, I'm never gonna catch up. So see you later.
that's what happened with me in
Division
Genshin
two.
Impact, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I enjoyed Genshin Impact. It's just
Yeah.
that Genshin is not the only thing I want to play. And the
Yep.
problem with so many of these live service games is that if you're not playing them every day, then you're missing out. And
Yep.
then like it's really hard to get back into them. And I would
Yeah.
love to get back into Genshin when I have the time. I'd love to like catch up with that story, go around that world. But it's a game that demands your time,
Yeah.
and
That
that
was
like I can't play it on my own terms anymore, and that's what
so
sucks.
like it's interesting to see like when you break up with a game. Like for me it was Division 2, right? So like I had a cool build, I had cool weapons, I had cool armor, I had all the stuff I wanted for my character, right? And then I took a couple weeks off, I started to fall a little bit behind, and then there was a big patch, and like my character was a marksmanship build. So like I would use like like far away guns and single shot and stuff like that, and they just put it in the dirt, right? They nerfed the shit out of it. And then so now I've got like the double death of like I don't really know what's going on. I don't have the good stuff anymore. Why am I going to stick with this? And it killed the whole game for me. I never went back to it after just logging on, seeing that my build was shit. and I'd missed so much stuff that could have caught me back up, and I just didn't feel like doing the work. And that's what it is. It's work, right? I mean, whenever that happens to your character in that kind of game, so um, it's weird. Like that's just had me thinking about like sometimes devs rely on little tricks, but they can definitely backfire if you're not 100% into that game and you've got to take 4 months off of it because of real life.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at as well. Like I don't want to abandon these things, but sometimes I'm almost obligated to. Like what
Yeah,
makes these games so addictive and what keeps people in is what will eventually lose the entire crowd because
right.
everybody at some point has to take a break.
Yeah,
And like player retention is great if you can have people logging in every day and like especially those people are whales, but you're also like the retention strategies that keep these people logging in every day are going to eventually drive away more casual players who really do love your game and would come back to it and might even spend some cash. But the trade-off is always going to be in favor of the people who spend the most cash, and those are not the
yeah,
casual players, unfortunately.
yeah. It just you just can't make it a job. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. I am not going to make like Genshin Impact or Fall Guys or any of these other games my job.
yeah.
So
Genshin's a great example, I think, because like I that game took off like gangbusters. Like it was everywhere, and it still kind of is in a way. But like I've definitely heard my friends who still play and keep up with it. Like I'm like, oh man, Genshin looks really cool. They're like, if you haven't been playing, like it speaks its own language right now. Destiny's getting there, if not already, but like it's one of those things where like if you didn't jump in now, there's it's almost impossible to jump in because you missed just too much. If I sit there and say, well, look, you got to get your ascendant motes in order to get your motes of light ups, that'll get your, I mean, like you're like, what the hell are you even talking about, right? So, you start to speak that other language and you realize most people don't have that time. So, they've given up already. You lost them all out the door. So, but yeah, I really hope you get your GPU stuff fixed for sure.
yeah, because I am actually like I have a Yakuza Ishin, or sorry, Like a
Mm.
Dragon Ishin in my backlog right now, and I really want to play that game before the end of the year. And that new Lemmings like game is coming out next week,
Yeah,
Humanity. I wanted to try that. Uh, and so like I really need my graphics card back up and running, especially when the Fall Deluge comes, and I'm gonna want to
yeah.
play. Like I'm sure Frontiers of Pandora is coming out this year. I definitely want to play that.
It was
Um,
weird. This year was instead of the fall deluge, it felt like we got like a February one, didn't it? Like
oh
real weird,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
like a real weird timing one. But yeah, yeah, you got to get back to it. Those GPUs, man, now's the time. So shop a little bit.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and maybe I actually play Immortals of Avium because I'm
yeah.
gonna buy a GPU that can actually run it.
There's like gonna be something. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna be like, yeah, you're always chasing a dragon something on your computer. Like
Yeah,
even if you build everything at the time, you can't future proof anymore. You're only good for a year or two. It seems like.
yeah. Maybe this is like a sign from the universe that I should play
Huh.
Immortals of Avium because I was
Yeah,
like,
this is the
I
reason to
had
do
the
it.
card just under the one that would have let me play it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. What
you
you got, a
need,
2080?
yeah, I have a 2080. You need a
Yeah,
2080 Super.
yeah. Ah,
So I
there
was
you
like
go.
just off.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe this is a sign for the universe. Merv, you have to play Immortals of Avium. Can't argue with the universe. I guess I'm gonna play a magic first-person shooter.
Yeah, it's the
It
one
looks
that
really
sold it.
bad.
It
I'm
does.
sorry.
It looks like it's gonna have that kind of same feel like so many of these games do, where it's just like just this forgettable. Remember that game where you were like a cowboy demon, or like you know what I mean? Like just like there's always like these types of games that come and go. You
The
can slow down time and you eat bullets, or it's yeah. There's nothing about that game that really seems memorable, so I wouldn't
like
exactly be upgrading just for that. But
the thing about it is I'm actually super down for the premise of a magic shooter.
yeah,
But if you're going to set a game in a fantasy world where you have no obligation to hew to the aesthetics of like real world combat or anything that looks like a gun, why would you set it in this drab, barren, rocky
yeah,
world with a muted color palette? Why would you have like colors exploding everywhere and like these super cool enemies with that look inhuman? And why don't you give me weapons that are a little more interesting and just like analogs to pistols and shotguns and assault rifles.
Yeah, you could get Borderlands with it. There's no reason you couldn't. You know,
Yeah,
like
you can like have the pistol analog, but have other cool things too.
yeah, this gun is blessed by an ice switch and shoots snowballs. That yeah, exactly.
Like get crazy with it.
Yeah.
Why this game looks so aesthetically drab compared to what it should be. Like I want to feel like a freaking wizard.
Yeah.
I
This
want to feel like a
back.
parkouring wizard. Like give
It's
me
a
Titanfall 2 but fantasy. That's what I want.
yeah, but like drab gray lifeless shooter was its own genre for 20 years. So maybe they're trying to see if there's anything left in that old well, you know?
Yeah, I just like if you're gonna give me a drab gray lifeless shooter, just make it realistic,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I'll enjoy it for. Like, I mean, these things aren't realistic in the sense that they would ever happen, but like, let me enjoy it for being a facsimile of something that might happen in the real world, as compared to like what fantasy is in my mind, where I just expect the color and I expect that
Yeah.
vivacity
If you're
that I'm
selling
not
me on
getting.
magic, you got to do a little bit better than running around with a pistol. That's not as fun.
Yeah, but like I said, can't argue with the universe. I'm gonna play this game probably now
Yeah,
that
you are.
the universe is making me play it.
I can't wait for me and you to play the Pandora game too. That's gonna be the best episode ever.
There's a Pandora game?
Or the Avatar game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got so confused. I was like, "There's a game about Pandora's box? Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I'm actually I have no idea what to expect. Like this is
Yeah.
either going to be like it could be anything from excuse me, it could be anything from like the most generic Ubisoft open world mush to like a total reinvention of the open world map game genre.
Yeah.
I mean, not like Tears of the Kingdom like reinvention, but something really creative and fantastic and cool.
It's something I really want to experience. Like the best way I can say about this is I'm not saying it's review proof for me or you know what I mean, but like I don't know that I can trust other people who aren't as invested maybe in that world as I am, as ridiculous as it sounds, you know? I want to experience it for myself and see what I think. I don't feel like I have to see what somebody else thinks about it. I feel like I can enjoy it for how I'm gonna play it.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had games like that before. Like Digimon Story was that for me. Like
Hmm.
I'm a bit of a Digimon nerd.
Like
Yeah.
I think the best example I can give it for me is Dynasty Warriors, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah, for sure.
like somebody's gonna be down to be like, this sucks. I hate hitting these things over and over. I'm like, yeah, that's Dynasty Warriors. Now tell me about like, does this one have Lu Bu with black armor? Like I wanna like that's kind of where I'm at in a lot of those.
For sure. All right. I think we can call this episode to a close.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. And we had a lot of really good discussions about recent happenings in the game industry, what we've been playing, and all that fun stuff. If you would like to keep up to date with the podcast, we have a website where you can follow us, avocadogamescast.wordpress.com, where we post each episode along with a link dump that fact checks some of what we say. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, or Spotify. Just search for Avocado Gamescast on any of those services. I got the invite to add us to Amazon Music. I've just been lazy and haven't done it yet, so
Huh.
I should probably go do that.
Look at us moving up.
No promises though. I'll probably forget. I'm not sure if the invite is even still active. I'm really bad at getting this stuff done. Also, make sure you check out The Avocado, which is the community that spawned this podcast at the-avocado.org. We have a lot of great discussions, not just about video games, also about movies, sports, music, and any other fun kind of stuff under the sun that you want to talk about. All right. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Kappa,
no
and thank
problem.
you to Lovely Bones, who was here with us earlier, for joining us. We will see you folks next time. Take care,
Take care.
everyone. I am back.
All right.
Let me get into it. We'll actually be able to finish in pretty good time,
Yeah,
and then I'm
yeah.
gonna
I think we
watch.
probably got an hour-ish left.
Yeah, I can
Pretty good.
watch NHL game, which is nice. I always really find it funny that we're both into sports, but completely different sports.
Yeah, it's tough because I've told everybody in the hockey world it's tough in North Carolina specifically because we've had the Hurricanes and they've been a good team for a long time, right? Like
Yeah.
they've always been a decent hockey team, but we're one of those cities where like our owner is not rich. Like he's a rich sports owner, but he's not like rich, right? And so he's always kind of used like a lot of like other cities and stuff to leverage for things. And it's always just kind of like, well, Seattle needs a team. Maybe we can, so a lot of Hurricanes fans will tell you like the reason that there's not like a lot of like a love for the team has nothing to do with the team. It's more like the owner who's like constantly threatening to take them away,
Oh,
which is kind of a
that's
shitty.
just like the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, yeah.
Up until Eugene Melnick died recently, and now they're going to sell the team to some consortium that promises to keep the team here. Also, Gary Bettman would actually never let the Sens leave because it's too big a hockey market to leave Barron.
And I didn't know this. There are not a lot of Canadian hockey teams in the NHL.
There are
I mean,
7.
I didn't. Yeah, but I mean, like in the scheme of things, for like as popular as hockey is in Canada, I always thought it'd be a little more like 50-50. But I forgot like a lot of those teams in Canada left and never really got replaced. Because when I was a kid watching NHL a lot more, it was like what Edmonton had a team.
Edmonton still does. They're
Oh,
the
they
team I
do.
was going to watch
See,
tonight.
there you
So
go.
the only two that left were the Jets, the
That's it.
Winnipeg
Winnipeg.
Jets, and the
Yeah.
Quebec Nordiques. But the Jets came back. Nordiques have never come back.
That no, okay. I knew it was one of them. Was it Quebec Nordiques?
Yeah, the Quebec City, like
Yeah.
they still existed when my dad was living in Quebec City. So I think my dad went to a couple of Nordiques games. Not entirely sure. I'll have to ask him about it. But yeah, they became the Colorado Avalanche.
That's it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that was like we're in like the Phoenix Coyotes and all those other like ill team. Like Atlanta had a team. The
Yeah.
Thrashers, I think.
Thrashers, I
Yeah.
believe, became Minnesota Wild.
Yeah. I just remember there being like why are Atlanta, and it was because they were bigger markets,
Yeah.
than they were hockey towns. So, yeah.
Southern expansion has worked in some cities. Like, it became hockey actually became big in Tampa after they won a few cups. Because of Gretzky, hockey became huge in LA.
Mhm.
LA is weirdly a hockey town. Like that was something that surprised me in the couple of years I lived there. Um,
I mean, it's popular in Raleigh, but like, like people aren't diehard because so like Carolina's kind of weird. Like we've got the Panthers, right? But they're really a Charlotte, South Carolina team. Like people from Raleigh don't travel to Charlotte. North Carolina's a really long state. It's like 8 hours left to right,
yeah,
So there's not a lot of people who are making the trip to Charlotte for a football game. And so when they put the Hurricanes in Raleigh, everybody's like, "Oh, cool." But Raleigh's a lot smaller than Charlotte too at the same time. So you know what I mean? It's kind of one of those like weird in between towns, and because of that, it's always been a little bit. Well, when we feel like it, we're just going to sell your fucking team. you know? But yeah, that's why I grew up watching the Hartford Whalers, and weirdly, that's the team
yeah,
that
they
moved
became
down to North
the
Carolina
Kings. Yeah,
when I moved down to North Carolina. So,
there you go.
but yeah,
All right, let's get back into it.
sure,
We should like stitch this conversation out, put it elsewhere.
yeah, yeah. Hockey outtakes.
Hockey outtakes. You can put it at the end. I've
Yeah,
been listening to a couple podcasts lately that do that, where they take the outtakes and they splice them in at the end.
yeah,
Game Mess does that one. It's Jeff Grubb's podcast.
yeah.
All right, I'll count us back in.